Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Community and Protective Services Committee meeting for today, April the 25th, 2017. I'm the acting chair. Our regular chair is Mo Sally. However, he will be leaving in a few minutes, so he has asked me to sit in as the vice chair for this committee. So, is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? None? Okay. Now, we have a number of delegation that we have for 4 o'clock, but I just want to test the consent items first. Are there any consent items that we want pulled? Depending on how many, I may go straight to item number 10. So let me see. Councillor Cassidy, which one?
I have questions on all of them except for 2, 5, and 8.
All except 2, 5, and 8? Okay. Any others would like to pull? Councillor Armstrong?
Sorry, number 8.
You want to pull 8?
Yep, thanks.
Okay. Any others? Yes? You want to pull 4? Okay, so we got a lot of them to pull. So committee, I'd like to slip the consent items. However, our chair has to leave and he needs to address item number 4. So with your consent, I'd like to do item number 4 from the consent item, then we move right on to item number 10 and we come, and perhaps 11, and then we come back to the consent items. How do you feel about that? Do I have your agreement? Okay. So we'll do item, we won't move the others. We won't move the others right now. We'll just do item number 4 for now. So we'll do item number 4. Item number 4 is on the floor. First, I'm going to ask staff if they would kindly give us a little synopsis about item number 4 before I go to the committees. Ms. Livingston?
Yes, and through the chair, this report is bringing forward a recommendation that the United Way of London and Middlesex be asked to be the lead agency for the implementation body for London for All. When Council received and accepted London for All last spring, there was a resolution directing civic administration to move forward with supporting the implementation or development of the implementation body, and we undertook to do that work. We consulted last spring and summer and reported back to Council in the fall on what the next steps would be, including issuing an EOI and RFP to identify the lead agency. So this report is bringing forward who that, a recommendation on who that lead agency would be to move forward with the, and I want to be clear, it's about the implementation of the recommendations. It is not about any further planning. It is about the implementation of the recommendations.
Okay, committee members? Councillor Sally?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just had a few other questions through you to staff. Do we have any other alternatives or other options when talking about this? Because I do have some reservations with moving forward in this direction. Is there a reason why we can't do this in-house? Is there a reason why we can't do this with an advisory sort of committee set up here internally? Or is there absolutely no options where we have to go externally and use such significant city resources?
Ms. Livingston?
Through the chair, both in the report from London for All, the panel made a clear recommendation that while the City of London would be an important partner in implementation, the lead agency of the implementation body needed to sit outside of government. The rationale in the report partly is because of needing to be able to advocate to all levels of government independently. So that's one reason. When we were asked to go out and talk to the community about what the implementation body should look like, what they should do, that position was affirmed by the community, that while the city was an important partner, we should not be the ones to lead the work around implementation. So that's why we have proceeded as it's been laid out in terms of seeking an independent third party to take on that function.
Through the chair.
Anyone else?
So if you could maybe give me an example as, because I'm really trying to wrap my head around this, and a number of residents have asked me the same thing. What would it look like if this was the direction we were heading and the United Way was the one who was leading this. So if you look at one of the 112 recommendations, would they then say, well, we'll pick number 7, and this is how we're gonna do it? So I'm just kind of walk me through how that would look like.
Thank you for the question. In our November report, we laid out in a little more detail the functions and roles and responsibility, but essentially the lead agency is not the decision maker. They're the body bringing people together to move forward with the implementation of the recommendation. So yes, there's been progress on the first 27 of that 112, but there's a lot of work to be done about how do we approach the next 80 some odd, what order, bringing community partners together to identify who's responsible for which set of recommendations. That's part of their role. The other part of the role is to bring together people with lived experience to be able to participate meaningfully in this process. That was a critical component of London for All, that people with lived experience be involved as key decision makers. So part of their function is to support that effort as well. So their responsibility is really one of facilitation and bringing all the community partners together to be able to implement this plan. Much like they have done in the past around LIMLIP, the London Middlesex Immigration Partnership Council. They played that role in the early days of that work. So this is an organization that's familiar with community mobilization and delivering on a plan. That would be their function.
Just my last question, comment, and I'll turn it and I'll come back maybe later on. So for me, I'm struggling still just with even the price tag. For example, when I look at the London Police Working Group that I had been co-chair with the Chief of Police, because there was a number of issues that were impacting the community and a lot of conversations. And we were able, with that working group, at no cost to the city to achieve a lot of things. And I think the chief, myself, and the members on that working group were able to do a lot. It didn't cost taxpayers nothing. And we were able to find the resources, have those people with lived experiences, and be able to do that. So I'm just struggling as to say, why I need to justify $100,000 a year to pay an external body to do this, when I think, I just don't see it, and I'm just having a hard time understanding what $100,000 is going to get me outside.
Through the chair, the amount of funding breaks into 2 major components. One is to support all that project management work. I describe it as the arms and legs, the actual people who are going to do the work. Bringing organizations together, writing the reports, reporting back out, laying out the plans, delivering on recommendations. That's the work that has to be done. There is no one tasked with doing that right now. And the other portion of the funding is to support people with lived experience to participate in a meaningful way. So that can be a variety of things. That can be financial supports, that can be child-minding supports, that can be meals. There's lots of dimensions to that aspect of it. So that's what the funding is. I should also indicate that part of the commitment of anyone that would have responded to the RFP was to be able to provide in-kind funding. So in their submission, the United Way has also indicated 2 key commitments, approximately $20,000 in-kind of their own resources, and a commitment to find an additional $100,000 to support the evaluation components, because there's a huge evaluation dimension to this as well. So they have some skin in the game in terms of moving forward on this.
Anyone else? Well, Councillor Squire?
Yeah, I just want to speak once on this, and I won't be supporting it. I suppose, from my point of view, I would have preferred a more direct route to dealing with the issues on the poverty panel. And that's certainly the route that I've chosen, and I've taken seriously myself implementing certain parts of the poverty panel, particularly with regard to transportation. And as I'm looking forward, I'm now sort of working on the youth bus pass, which is an important issue for me because we have a whole segment now of society that's paying almost $1,000 a year for a bus pass, who are in the age group that don't have a lot of money. And so I want to make sure they're taken care of. And when I look at an amount of money like $375,000, I cannot help but identify it as an amount of money that could do a 1-year pilot of that program to see it moving forward. So I think for me to have the poverty panel at this point in time passed off to a arm's length to another party when I think there's still work for us to do as a council and at City Hall, is not the approach I would have taken at this particular point in time. I'm not faulting anyone or anything like that. This is not the approach that I would have taken. $375,000 can do a lot, I think, and I would have liked to have seen it done in a more direct way, and I think it could have been. The other thing is from just a budget point of view, and it is a constant frustration. It's something that I raise all the time, that, you know, as a councillor, when I'm looking for money for particular projects, it's never anywhere, it's never identified. It can't seem to be found, and yet it's found when needed for some other things. And so I think what I'll do is, you know, I'm sure, I don't know what this committee will do, but I'll accept what they do in terms of moving forward. But I'll certainly hope that the committee will remember when I come back fairly soon and say, look, I'm looking for some money to do a pilot to help youth bus passes, that people will be receptive to that and understand that money's available to do a lot of things. And I think sometimes things councillors come up with are important also. So I will be voting against this today, but I wish you the best of luck.
Councillor Cassidy, and I'll just remind the members of the committee that let's address the chair, but also speak to the committee members, because even though this is a recommendation from staff, it is still a discussion among the committee, just to respect.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, I just want to remind, I know Ms. Livingston spoke about the direction from council on April 20th last year. I just want to remind that the direction was that civic administration be directed to provide support as necessary to assist the implementation body in bringing forward recommendations. This one. And that civic administration be directed to undertake the approach to the implementation of the report as set out in the section entitled Approach to Developing the Implementation Body. And that's on page 26 of the report. So our direction to staff was to take that section from the report and go forward and see to the creation of the implementation body using the approach in the report. And the report itself, as Ms. Livingston pointed out, says the implementation of the recommendations is best managed in partnership with, but outside of municipal government. So this is the direction that we gave staff last year, and this was based on the feedback we got from the community. The report itself was the work of the community. All of the recommendations came through public engagement with over 1,000 Londoners showed up at various meetings to give us their thoughts and provide us with their experience, because a great many number of Londoners with lived experience of poverty participated in this process. So that said, staff are following through on the direction we gave them last year. The other thing that I have a question about through you, Mr. Chair, is Ms. Livingston spoke about providing the means for people with lived experience to be part of the implementation body, to allow them to participate in a meaningful way. I would like to ask through you how some of the money that we are earmarking for this would be used to ensure that people with lived experience are able to participate on the implementation body.
Ms. Livingston?
Through the chair, as I indicated, of the 125,000 earmarked per year, approximately 25,000 of that would be allocated towards supporting people with lived experience to participate meaningfully. It's important to understand that participation would occur in terms of the implementation of a number of the recommendations, but also around the leadership table that will be established, where the community has recommended that at least a third of that leadership table be members with lived experience with poverty. And so looking at ways to support people to participate, and as I mentioned, however that may be, whether it's with childminding or other aspects to be able to participate, that's an important part of the function here.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to make a comment about just doing it. So there have been a number of things that have come through, definitely many initiated by Councillor Squire, some things initiated or requested by staff, some things initiated by other councillors, and that's very good, and we have to continue doing that, and that's our role as a municipal government. But there are a great many recommendations in the report that don't sit with this government. Some of them are provincial issues and some of them are federal. And so the idea of an independent arm's length body whose role will be to represent the community, because this is a community report, it's a community problem. It takes the whole community working together to address this problem and to make significant change happen. We have been doing these one-offs for generations. We have very, very good organizations and groups working in London that have been doing very good work and helping people, but they haven't made any kind of dent in the rates of poverty in London. We have over 60,000 people living in poverty in London. There's over 8,000 youth and children living in poverty in London. And we are not making any kinds of gains on that. So we need to change what we're doing. We have to stop working in these silos and being happy and content with these one-offs. We have to stop treating the symptoms of the disease and treat the disease itself. And this is a step in the right direction. We heard from the community. I specifically and directly heard from people with lived experience in poverty who, through this process, said, I have hope. I have hope for the first time that something different is going to happen. And so we have to do things differently. And this is the direction that we gave our staff, and I definitely will be supporting this.
Thank you, Mayor Brown.
Thank you very much. We're just over a year into the document being approved by council. This is the plan that the community wants. We know this because of the extensive consultation that occurred over the course of the 6 months that the committee worked and brought forward to council. This is what council supported. This is the direction that council supported. And you know, an important part of leadership is the ability to stay focused. And I think we need to stay focused because the decision has already been made. The decision has been made by this council. This process, the decision on this process has been made by this council. Now it's a matter of the bill. And there are things that we can stand up for and things that we can say, yes, we made the commitment to do this. And we're willing to take the criticism when we deal with the cost. 68,000 people in our community are experiencing poverty today. 68,000, 1 in 5 Londoners. Thousands of children are experiencing poverty today. That's why the community wanted us to do this work. That's why we did this work. That's why we're focused. That's why we're going to stay focused and let this plan move forward. This is a lot of money, $125,000. Yes, we have $1 billion budget. You can always make an argument that proportionately it's not a lot of money. It is a lot of money. But it's from our existing budget. It's dollars that will be well spent. And when we consider that 68,000 people experience poverty in our community every single day, it's less than $2 per individual. That, for me, provides the context. And it's not just the $125,000 that we're investing to eliminate poverty in our community within a generation. It's the $20,000 that we're leveraging from the United Way of in-kind dollars. It's the $100,000 that will be leveraged in-kind for evaluation because we need to hold ourselves accountable. And we're not using taxpayer dollars to do that. We're using leveraging support from an important community partner that knows how to do this. So we supported the plan as a council. I understand that individual councillors may not have, but as a council, we supported this plan. And now it's time to fund the plan so we can get to work. I'll be supporting this, and I'm sorry that we had to enter into debate over this at all tonight.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I agree with the comments of both two previous speakers. I guess the thing is we do have a plan here, and we need to implement the plan, and to implement plans, it costs money. $125,000 per year, I think that's a good investment, and quite frankly, to work at ending poverty, If you came in here asking for more, I would have been likely to support it. The fact is we had a lot of work's been done on this. There's been a lot of consultation in the community. Partners have come together, and the thing is, we need to continue our commitment to work towards ending poverty. Again, we talk about in a generation. I've said before, poverty needs to end now, as soon as possible. We need to make inroads. That's the only thing I don't agree with, waiting another generation. I don't agree with that. I think we can make inroads in this generation and with the kids that are growing up today, not the next generation. So I'll always have a problem with that theory. So in any event, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Park, welcome to our meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sitting in your former chair. I just have one question with regard to the report. In Part A of the recommendation, it talks about how this was an irregular bid. I was just curious if I could hear a little more about the other bids that came in. I recognize they weren't qualified, but how many other bids came in?
Through the chair, we followed both an expression of interest where a single bid came in, and because of our procurement policy, we then had to move to an RFP, which we did, and also a single bid came in through that process. That's why it's an irregular bid.
Thanks for that clarification. One of the things that struck me as with one bid coming in, that meant that the whole sector as a whole believed that this organization should be the lead champion on going forward with the recommendation that council made, the direction, pardon me, that council made to go forward with hiring an organization to take the lead on this huge problem that we have in our community. I think that talks about the community confidence in this organization to carry on this work and how that they can leverage what they do day to day with the dollars that the city would be contributing into this. Recognizing that how monumental a problem poverty is in the City of London, I think it's hugely critical for us to recognize that if everybody thought they could solve this problem, there would have been a flood of bids coming in on this, but we didn't see that. So I think that we should look at this with a community focus, a community confidence, and move forward with this. And I can recognize the fact that we want to be able to put dollars in people's pockets to end poverty. Unfortunately, we don't have the budgetary means to do that, but what we can do is give the initiative to an organization that can make tangible results coming forward out of this. So I truly look forward to seeing the success of this going forward and recognizing that we're not done as a council in terms of how we look forward to ending poverty in a generation or even at all in London, because it's a monumental task and each and every Londoner plays a big part in fixing that problem.
Anyone else? Mo? Councillor Sally?
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and, I appreciate the comments from my colleagues, but to me, this isn't a matter of if I believe that United Way has demonstrated that they can do good work or not. To me, it's what I'm looking at, what's in front of me. The report, the comments, it doesn't demonstrate to me that they're going to be able to necessarily execute with what has been set forward, whether it's the resources. I'm not sure what the plan even looks like. So what I'm telling the community and those who are still living in poverty, that I regularly have conversations with, that I regularly meet, and that I know personally, that I know that are in my family, that we're giving someone out in our community who we all know and is a trusted brand an opportunity to try to do something. And I'm not knocking them for that, but what I'm saying is I don't know what that something is. I don't know exactly how they're going to do it, and I don't know why someone else can't do it or others can't do it without this huge price tag that's necessarily involved, because we can do a lot. Because what I'm worried about is in 2 or 3 years when we come back and we said we spent $400,000 and it comes off as if we just really didn't do anything because nothing really tangible came out at the end. I would have appreciated in their submissions knowing exactly, well, this is how we're going to tackle these issues. This is how we're going to fight poverty. This is exactly what we're going to do versus we're going to coordinate, we're going to advocate, we're going to talk, which is essentially continuing more conversations and having more meetings and pieces like that. So to me, it's not a matter of if I don't think they're a great organization, but what's in front of me doesn't say to me that something's going to be done with poverty. And I don't want us to just spend and waste $400,000 without having that confidence, because I know $400,000 can go a long way for a lot of people in this community, but I don't want to come back in a couple years and say, we didn't do anything and we just cut a check to some organization and nothing tangible was actually done.
Thank you. Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And anybody that has questions about what the role of the implementation body, not the United Way necessarily, but the implementation body itself, I invite them to go back to the update that this committee received back November 15th, 2016. And it's laid out very clearly what the implementation body is expected to do, how they are expected to function. It will involve engagement, yes, which includes conversations, but it will involve research, planning, coordination, evaluation, reporting, and advocacy. There is a very clearly laid out as well what the implementation body structure will be. The fact that we are only earmarking $375,000 to this is something that should give us pause, because it is a lot of money, but as Councillor Park pointed out, this is a monumental task, and that's not a lot of money for such a monumental task. There were many people that complained when the report finally came out, and they complained that the motion that directed staff how to proceed, how to go forward with the report and the recommendations. There were complaints in the community that there was no money attached to that. We gave staff direction. We said, implement this report, see to the creation of the implementation body, but we didn't earmark any money for that. Staff, throughout the poverty panel process, our backbone team in civic administration, they were working basically 2 full-time jobs. For 6 months, these people worked harder than anybody here could ever imagine working. I know it was very stressful for them. And the panel members themselves were all volunteers. And the expectation for this implementation body is that it will involve a lot more volunteers as well. So $125,000 a year to get this up and running, to get this going. The other role of the implementation body will be, as I said, evaluation and reporting. So what we want to see are measurements, metrics, indicators of what effect these recommendations are having, the recommendations as they are being implemented. What effect and what success are they having? It's not a matter of, again, this siloed approach where certain programs are funded and nobody ever really knows, is there any success? Is it working? Is it doing the things that we want it to do? So that measurement piece is another part of it. As far as asking our staff to take on this role, it would involve a lot more money, because we would have to hire probably another department or a sub-department at City Hall to ensure that this implementation body gets going the way we want to see it get going. And through you, Mr. Chair, I hear what Councillor Armstrong is saying, and I agree with him that a generation is a long time. And I would love to see the goal achieved sooner than that. But we have to start. We have to tackle the problem little bits at a time in increments and see that the whole thing, that we make the achievements that we're looking to achieve. And we have to make real differences in people's lives that have been living with this problem and have not had any means or hope of getting out of the situation that they're in. We have to, they put their faith in this report, they put their faith in this council for lasting change, and we can't let them down. We have to move forward with this, and I believe that staff have come through with a really good recommendation, and the United Way is the organization that has the experience and the expertise to move this forward, to move the creation of the implementation body forward. The implementation body itself, people should remember, will be representative of the community. There will be all sectors on this implementation body to ensure that London as a whole, as a community, is well represented, and 1/3 of that implementation body will be people with lived experience.
Thank you. Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At my committee, Civic Works, yesterday, we approved about $28 million worth of projects, and some of them are very exciting for London, coming from that committee. And I think probably the most exciting thing that this committee can do in London is deal with poverty. The United Way is very well established in the community and extremely well connected. There's a lot of moving parts with poverty. And I think they've got a connection with most of those. And I think that itself will be very valuable for us. I was thinking to myself, they probably have more connections than Heathrow Airport. And we can leverage that in this way. I don't know that I see this as a great deal of money for that purpose. What I do hope is that we move forward, because although this is an irregular bid and not one that we had a lot of uptake on, we do have a group that's very confident, and I think most people would be confident about. And our term is coming to an end, right? We're 2.5 years out of 4. So I think it's important for us to stay the course in many ways. We've got a strategic plan. It's good to move it forward. Things may not be ideal in some people's perspective, but marching forward is what's going to get us to the goal. So I'll be supporting this when it comes to council, and I'm going to be looking forward to what happens with great interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Helmer, welcome.
Thanks for recognizing me at your committee, Chair. My first question is about the source of financing. We've covered a lot of ground here, and I know it's referred to sort of near the end of the report, but there's not what you typically see with the Civic Works report. We have a detailed source of financing for everything. So I wonder if you could speak to where it's coming from in the operating budgets.
Ms. Livingston?
Yes, through the chair, between Ms. Dadersbeer and myself, we have identified the funds within our existing resources. I can tell you in my case, it is a reallocation, a portion from the Child and Youth Network Ending Poverty table to support aspects of this, particularly around people with lived experience. The London for All talks about system change and organizations serving poverty to realign resources. So this was something I could do in terms of those resources. So that's a portion of where the funding is coming from.
Senator Beers?
Thank you through the chair. As Ms. Livingston has indicated, this is part of the core work that we do within our service area as well within social services, is to address poverty issues, especially with those clients who are involved with our Ontario Works program or broader social service programs. We're able to align some of our contract dollars, some consulting dollars towards this as well. In an interim basis, it's one-time dollars, obviously.
Thank you. And so I haven't really made up my mind whether I support the idea. And one of my concerns is not to have the implementation body, which I think is a good idea to have it outside of the city, and not even the total amount of money, but sort of how it's being financed, right? So I do see this as a community plan, and similar to many other projects we've had that have come before us, frankly, a bit more often they're one-time or one-off projects outside the budget cycle where they have a sort of specific report. What happens in the pattern that I've seen is that the city ends up paying the entire amount. So we had, for example, the Canada 150 celebration party downtown. Interesting idea, but who else is contributing money to the project? Because if it's going to be a community initiative, perhaps we could have a bit of a broader base of people contributing, right? Perhaps there's some private sector people who want to contribute to ending poverty in our community. I imagine there are. There's a lot of them who give to United Way already. And I'm glad, on the one hand, that United Way is contributing some money in kind, because frankly, they have a lot of support all over the place and not just from government. But I do think that's a piece that's a bit tough for me, is we're putting in, essentially all of the money except for the part coming from the United Way. And I would like to see it more broadly resourced, let me put it that way. So I'm gonna think about it between now and council. I do think that this has got more detail on it in terms of what's happening than some of the other funds that we've approved for other things that are similar amounts. I think there's potentially better returns if the implementation improves. And I like the aspect that it's looking at evaluation. I also like the aspect that of the areas where we took the funding from internal to the city, shaving off a little bit of consulting work on the one side and reallocating dollars from the poverty table for the Child and Youth Network over to the similar work that's happening here to make sure that people with the experience can participate. Those are very smart changes to make internal to the city. So I do support those kind of sources of financing from inside the city. So I'll be thinking about it between now and council.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Councillor Armstrong, I'm going to ask you to take the chair while I just make a statement. You could sit right there. Yeah. Thank you. Well, it seems to me that we need to do some work on this. We brought this to council already, as far as I'm concerned, and council gave an indication to go out and find a person to take the lead. And this is the organization that we have selected to take the lead. We definitely need a lead agency. I don't see staff doing this. I don't see us interrupting all the work that we are doing, because this is an aside, but it is a very important an aside. And it's something that we promise that we are going to get done in 1 generation. And some of you say that 1 generation is a long time. I think 1 generation is a short time. It all depends on how many years you're looking at, but it doesn't take long. And before you know it, it can get worse. And I think that we have to arrest it and then begin to take some actions. And I can't think of any other organizations better at this point in time, at least over the next 3 years, than United Way to do this. And I don't believe that $125,000 per year is a lot of money for this purpose. I do recognize the fact that if somebody gives me $125,000 outside the door there, I'll take it. Not a bribe, but I'll take it. But for the work that has to be done, I think it's a worthwhile effort. We have to remember that the leadership role will be done by United Way under the project management aspect, and then they have to coordinate all the activities with a whole lot of different organizations who are very interested in this, who are just waiting, from my understanding, to participate in this, to take some actions. And to me, that's where the whole thing is, the action that will be taken. Yeah, most of you have always heard me say, it's a lot of talk and no walk. Well, I believe that this is the beginning of the walk in this particular effort, and I look forward to seeing something happen. It's not going to happen overnight. It's probably not even going to happen over the next year. But I believe that by the time the first 3 years, we're going to begin to see some direction that we could build on. And I'm definitely going to support it at this point in time. So I'll call the vote. I'll ask for a mover and a second, and then we'll call the vote. Thank you.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-2.
Okay, committee, as promised, we're moving on to item number 10, and we'll come back to the consent items. We have 6 people who have asked for delegation status for this. I want to identify that this is not a public participation meeting. It's very important that we understand that, and you have to get delegation status to be able to speak here. We've got 6 people who we have promised to allow to speak. Now, here are the rules. You got 5 minutes. I'm going to time you. Not a second more than 5 minutes will I allow, because we don't have the time. There won't be any debate about this while you're speaking. There won't be any answers to questions in any way whatsoever. You asked for a delegation status. That means you came here to make a presentation. We're going to listen to you, and we're going to make a decision after we hear you all. So The first speaker is Krista Oglen. Now, I understand that Krista has asked Elena Kathka to speak. Is she here?
Kitka,
Is that you?
Alana Kitka. yeah.
Okay, you've got 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. I am Alana Kitka. Thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of Krista Oglen. The following is based on the Fireplace Delusion by Sam Harris. To many, a fire burning safely within the confines of a fire pit or chimney is a visible and tangible source of comfort. Because wood is among the most natural substances on earth, most people imagine that burning wood must be a perfectly benign thing to do. Breathing air scented by wood smoke seems unlike puffing on a cigarette or inhaling the exhaust from a passing truck, and yet in many ways it is actually worse. There is absolutely no amount of wood smoke that is good to breathe, and once you smell it, it is being inhaled. Studies shows that in many times it's more potent as carcinogen than cigarettes. It's a mutagenic. Mutagen is an agent that changes genetic material such as DNA. It's teratogenic. Teratogen is an agent that disturbs the development of the embryo or fetus, and it is very irritating and damaging to the respiratory system. Most of the particles generated by burning wood are a size that it is most damaging to our lungs. In fact, these particles are so fine that they can evade our mucociliary defenses and travel directly into the bloodstream, posing a risk to the heart. Particles this size also resist gravitational settling, remaining airborne for weeks at a time. Think of that. Once they have exited your fire pit or chimney, these toxic gases, for example benzene, are particles that make up smoke, pass freely into your home and into homes of others. Children who live in areas where wood burning is common are shown to suffer a higher incidence of asthma, cough, bronchitis, nocturnal awakening, and compromised lung functions. Among adults, wood burning is associated with more frequent emergency room visits and hospital admissions for respiratory illnesses, along with increased mortalities from heart attack. The inhalation of wood smoke, even at relatively low levels, alters pulmonary immune function, leading to a greater susceptibility to colds, flus, and other respiratory infections, and everyone is affected, everyone. In fact, the wood smoke often contributes more harmful particulates to urban air than any other source. The unhappy truth about burning wood has been scientifically established a moral certainty that cozy, nice fire inside of your home is bad for you, bad for your children, and bad for your neighbors and their children, and bad for the environment. The case against burning wood is every bit as clear as the case against cigarettes, first or second hand. Indeed, it is even clearer because when you light a fire, you needlessly poison the air that everyone around you for miles must breathe. But even if you reject every intrusion of the nanny-state, you should agree that the recreation of burning of wood is unethical and should be illegal, especially in urban areas. By lighting a fire, you are creating pollution that you cannot dispose of. There's nowhere to go. Your neighbors should not have to pay the cost of this archaic behavior by anyone. Most people that I meet want to live in an imaginary world in which wood smoke is harmless. Indeed, they seem committed to living in such world, regardless of the facts. And yet, the reality of our situation is scientifically unambiguous. If you care about your own health, your family health, and that of your neighbors, then the sight of a glowing fire in your neighbor's backyard should be about as comforting as the sight of a large diesel engine idling out there.
You have 1 minute to go.
It is time to break the spell and burn nothing at all. It is time for a complete ban on all outdoor burning. It is never wrong to make things right. Thank you.
Excuse me, we don't do that here because you're going to interrupt the timing. We certainly appreciate you feeling that way, but there might be some people who might be speaking in the opposite. So we certainly would appreciate you if you do not give up an applaud. You can always do that afterwards if you would like to. Thank you. The next speaker is Rita Astvels. Is Rita here?
Rita is not here. She emailed me this morning. She's unable to be here because of health matters. She asked me to read, if that's possible, her presentation.
Well, we did not get a letter from Rita about that.
I have it. I have a copy of the email if you need some sort of
Okay,
proof,
just a
but-
second. Committee, will we allow him to speak in place of Rita?
Well, Mr. Chair, I think he's speaking as well, am
I
I
am.
correct? So
However-
I'm just thinking, you can read the letter. Does he have extra copies? Because we can get the letter and save him reading it. Unless it needs it. Is it on the agenda?
Okay, so we have a small letter from Rita, I believe.
Is that
Yes.
the,
So we have that here.
All right.
So we'll leave that, and then when your turn comes to read, we have her letter unless she has added something to the letter.
No, it's essentially the same. If
Okay.
anything, it's actually condensed more,
Yeah,
so
okay. We'll pass that then.
if that's your choice, sure.
Yeah, thank you. The next speaker is David McMillan. David is up to the left.
I would like to talk about how outdoor fires have adversely affected myself and my family. My daughter has asthma and, like many others, has difficulty breathing when there is smoke. Like the rest of us, she can avoid cigarette smoke because cigarette smoke is frowned upon by society. However, open air burning, which is far more dangerous, is ignored. It is hypocritical how a society like ours is protected from one, but not the other. Years ago, when cigarette smoking was banned, some people were up in arms. Now it is just accepted as the norm. I have no doubt open air burning will eventually be totally banned within city limits. I urge you to be proactive and ban it now. Presently, if a neighbor chooses to have a fire on a hot summer evening, it is impossible to avoid the smoke. Our house has new double insulated windows, and even with the air conditioning on, the smoke gets in and gives my wife a terrible headache. Does it make sense that we allow people to adversely affect the health of others? The present bylaw states that no open-air fires be within 50 meters from any building, structure, property line, tree, hedge, fence, roadway, or overhead wire. Clearly, this is very difficult to enforce. However, I believe anyone having an outdoor fire within the city limits would be in violation of this bylaw. Years ago, a neighbor behind us had an open-air fire. I walked over to explain how it was giving my wife a terrible headache. They immediately extinguished their fire. However, later on, they began having fires again. I phoned the fire department, and a few minutes later, a fire truck with sirens blaring arrived at their house with 5 or 6 firefighters in full equipment. They extinguished the flame and explained to them that they were in violation of the bylaw. I shudder to think of what that little outing cost us as taxpayers. With more similar complaints, firefighters will only insist that they need more personnel to deal with these escalating nuisance calls. Citizens are already concerned with the high cost of firefighters' salaries in the latest contract. It doesn't make sense that we add to this expense by allowing open-air burning. It's bad enough to have one neighbor with an open-air fire. What if everyone decided to have a fire at the same time? A few years ago, the federal government decided to make everyone equal by eliminating door-to-door mail delivery. More community boxes were built, but because some citizens protested, they were removed, and door-to-door delivery was restored in those areas. People can protest over things like this and get results. Open-air burning is far more serious than mail delivery. It's time for a complete ban on outdoor fires. It's a matter of life and death, yet people insist on polluting the air that we breathe. On more than one occasion during the summer, my wife and I have been out for a walk in the evening, and we left our windows open to get some fresh air, only to return to our home filled with smoke, which lingered for 2 or 3 days, resulting in a splitting headache for my wife for a number of days. In short, I feel that if you want to have a fire outdoors, go camping. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Kathy Trelevin.
I'm reading a statement from Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment. And I chose it because it's concise and it's logical. And they list 17 reasons to ban wood burning. All pollution is not created equal. Wood smoke is the most toxic type of pollution in most cities, more dangerous than auto pollution and most industrial pollution. Lifetime cancer risk is 12 times greater for wood smoke compared to an equal volume of secondhand cigarette smoke. It increases the severity of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, COPD, asthma, and the list goes on and on. Burning 10 pounds of wood for 1 hour releases as much polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons as 6,000 packs of cigarettes. Toxic free radical chemicals in wood smoke are biologically active 40 times longer than free radicals in cigarette smoke. Wood smoke is the largest source of dioxins, one of the most intensely toxic compounds known to science. The very small size of wood particles makes them 7 times more likely to be inhaled than other particulate pollution. Wood smoke easily penetrates the homes of neighbors, creating concentrations up to 88% as high as outdoor air. One wood-burning neighbor can regularly expose you to harmful chemicals, and this effect is multiplied many times over in densely populated cities. If you smell wood smoke, you know you are being harmed. The sweet smell comes from deadly compounds like benzene. Considering the most dangerous part of particulate pollution, wood burning produces as much overall as our cars during the winter. The inhalable particulate pollution from one wood stove is equivalent to the amount emitted from 3,000 gas furnaces producing the same amount of heat. Wood smoke is the only pollution emitted right where people spend most of their time. It disperses poorly, is not evenly distributed, and stays in the air longer because of its small size. Concentrations can be 100 times higher for neighbors of wood burners than what is captured at the neighboring monitoring station. Real local pollution victims are created even when overall community levels are low. And this is an American report, but it applies here. According to California's Bay Area Quality Management District, wood burning costs the rest of the community, primarily your next-door neighbors, at least $2 in extra medical expenses for every 1 pound of wood that you burn. An average fire then costs your neighbors about $40. Long ago, most communities passed ordinances protecting people from secondhand cigarette smoke. Ironically, those laws protect people at places they don't necessarily have to be, such as restaurants, stores, and buildings. But in the one place they have to be, their own home, they have no protection from something even worse, which is wood smoke. People should have just as much protection from wood smoke as from cigarette smoke, and for all the same reasons.
You have 50 seconds, Kathy.
We don't allow people to blow cigarette smoke into your face Why should we allow people to blow wood smoke into your home? Wood burning is not even close to carbon neutral over the short term, and in the next few decades, it will likely make or break the climate crisis. Burning wood is extremely inefficient. Per unit of heat created, wood produces more CO2 than most fossil fuels. Furthermore, the black carbon particulate matter released enhances the absorption of radiant heat in the atmosphere, making global warming worse, and prematurely melts the already imperiled mountain snowpack. And I'd just like to say that my neighbors burn wood even if the wind speed is more than 15 kilometers an hour. They burn on rainy days, they burn on foggy days. The guidelines don't seem to apply to them.
Thank you. So, Alma Hislop. Okay.
Mr. Chairman and members of committee, good afternoon. Full disclosure, I don't live in London. I have relatives here. I'm from Woodstock down the road, where we also have problems with open air burning. So what's wrong with wood smoke? Pretty much all the same things that are wrong with cigarette smoke. It's a toxic chemical stew of compounds known to be carcinogenic and otherwise detrimental to human respiratory and cardiovascular systems. In fact, wood smoke is quite similar to cigarette smoke, but with an extra dose of fine particulate matter, of which the World Health Organization tells us there is no safe level of exposure, and a dump of greenhouse gases and black carbon that contribute to global warming. Let's consider how we treat cigarette smoke in a civilized society. We protect ourselves from it, and we go to great lengths to protect children and other vulnerable groups from it. We educate the public about smoking hazards and try to help the addicted to quit. In Ontario, it's illegal to smoke in a vehicle with a child on board, and it's illegal to light a cigarette within 20 meters of a children's playground or a sports field. Compare that to London's open-air burning bylaw that permits backyard fires a mere 4 meters from a property line. And consider the volume of material being burned, the tip of a cigarette versus a pile of wood, hundreds of times the fuel and hundreds of times the smoke. All dead vegetation produces similar hazardous smoke when burned. This applies to wood, autumn leaves, and tobacco. No matter how dry, clean, and well-seasoned your firewood is, as the Utah physicians expressed it, that fire pit is still a toxic incinerator. Let's jump to California, where the authorities are quite aware of air quality issues. The research done there prior to the 2013 decision on beach bonfires determined that particulate matter from a bonfire disperses downwind and decreases by 98% at a distance of 700 feet. Hence their ruling that bonfires must be at least 700 feet from the nearest residence. Compare again to London's bylaw with its 4 meter from the property line ruling. Beaches tend to be breezy places. Smoke will disperse. For fire safety reasons, London's bylaw prohibits open-air burning when wind speed is above 15 km per hour. Minimal wind means minimal dispersal. To quote the eloquent Sam Harris, again, "It might be the clearest day of the year, but burn a sufficient quantity of wood and the air in the vicinity of your home will resemble a bad day in Beijing." That is a crucial concept to grasp: proximity. On March 30th last year, this committee was told that fire pits probably don't affect London's overall air quality. That misses the point. People near a fire don't get to breathe overall or average air as recorded by the city's one monitoring station. They get the bad day in Beijing air, probably right off the scale of the Air Quality Health Index. London has issued this Burn Responsibly brochure, from which I quote, "Following these regulations ensures you do not create a nuisance for neighbors." Nonsense on two fronts. Wood smoke is a serious pollutant and a health hazard, not a nuisance. We used to think of tobacco smoke as a nuisance too, 3 or 4 decades ago. And in that same report you received last year, 24 to 33% of complaints were generated by fully compliant fires. Last Saturday, April 22nd, was Earth Day. Scientists and their supporters around the world participated in Marches for Science. You may have heard the following in the media coverage.
You have 1 minute, Kathy.
What do we want? Evidence-based science. When do we want it? After peer review. There is a substantial body of scholarly, peer-reviewed studies on the damaging effects of wood smoke on human health and on the environment, just like the mountain of studies that document the dangers of tobacco use and secondhand smoke. The next step is up to you, to translate that evidence into action by implementing a ban on open-air burning in London. A final word from the doctors and scientists against wood smoke pollution. As a society, we made a choice that people must not be exposed to secondhand cigarette smoke against their will. Given what we now know, it is time to extend this attitude to wood burning.
Thank you, Alma. Michael Luce.
I'm going to begin by reading the summary portion of Rita's presentation. Wood smoke and the cultural and social practices that allow it to be generated without regulation and control operates in a vacuum, where preconceptions, origin stories, and strong emotions impair action. It is now time for another narrative, dealing effectively with wood smoke as part of the necessary transition to a clean, green, and healthy future, as touted in London's very own strategic plan. There is absolutely no clear threshold below which particulate pollution is safe. None whatsoever. Since any increase in PM 2.5 levels results in increased death rates, we simply can no longer ignore backyard fires. They are unquestionably adding to the PM 2.5 burden right in our own backyards. What this means is that our society must totally rethink our attitudes towards wood burning. We can no longer afford to regard the smell of wood smoke as something evocative, nostalgic, or natural. The science is not subject to debate. If someone is burning wood, they are shortening the lives of their neighbors. I'm calling for a complete ban on outdoor burning. The following are some Ontario communities that have enacted bylaws to completely eliminate or severely restrict outdoor burning: Ajax, Brampton, Brantford, Burlington, Cambridge, Chatham-Kent, Clarington, Guelph, Hamilton, Kingston, Leamington, Niagara Falls, Niagara-on-the-Lake, Oshawa, Ottawa, Port Colborne, Quinte West, St. Catharines, Thorold, Toronto, Waterloo, Whitby, Windsor. Go inside and close your windows and everything will be just fine. Not so. In the Open Journal of Air Pollution, an article entitled "Infiltration of Black Carbon Particles from Residential Wood Smoke into Nearby Homes" taught us this: the overall exposure to newly generated wood smoke particles of an individual inside is close to the exposure of an individual outside. For the predominant source of black carbon from newly generated wood smoke, an average indoor/outdoor ratio of 0.78 shows the minimal shielding of a home provides. This is an important conclusion for sensitive individuals who try to avoid inhalation by seeking protection inside a home. Residential environments provide inhabitants with relatively little protection from recently generated wood smoke particles. The conventional wisdom of go or stay inside with windows closed isn't going to help you very much once a fire is set. And then there is the small issue of whether anyone should be forced to retreat indoors or have to close all their windows on a hot summer night or on any night, just to try and avoid a minimal portion of the smoke. A growing body of research clearly demonstrates that people who are routinely exposed to wood smoke pollution where they live face increased risks for serious health outcomes and even premature death compared to others who spend their days in neighborhoods with less localized air pollution. It makes no sense to restrict cigarettes to protect others from secondhand smoke while allowing individuals to pollute other spaces with wood smoke. According to the World Health Organization, the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health is one of the fundamental rights of every human being. When people, especially sick and vulnerable people, but really anyone, are forced to breathe wood smoke, they are denied the human right to attain their highest possible standard of health.
You have 55 seconds, Michael.
Thank you. Council must expeditiously enact a no-exception ban on outdoor burning in London, accompanied by a vigorous education campaign that properly articulates the dangers of wood smoke, and equip bylaw officers with a fine structure that discourages any such activity. Thank you for allowing us to speak today.
Thank you, Michael. Committee members, I just want to bring to your attention that we also have some additional submission in the added agenda from page 3 to page 42. So there are 39 pages in addition. So I'm going to open this for discussion and or a motion. The way I see it is that you've got 3 options. You can identify to staff to ban outdoor burning, or you can ask staff for a report, or you can just receive this note and file. I leave it. Councillor Cassidy.
I think when this came up, Mr. Chair, based on the last council direction on this issue, it was a decided matter. Is it still a decided matter, or has a year gone by?
It was a year ago, I understand, that we had this as a decided matter. Just want you to know that this is something that we review the bylaw on a yearly basis. You finished, Councillor Cassidy? Councillor Squire.
I want to thank everyone for their presentations. It's something that I know we received just over a year ago. And if we recall back then, we had a public participation meeting, and council made a decision that we would not institute a ban. We would create an education process. And that was a decision we made just over a year ago. So although I'm content to move that we receive the delegations, I have to say that I'm not prepared to enter into getting another report and going through an identical process within a short period of time. I appreciate we could, but that's not where I am at this point in time. And I have to tell you the reason why is because, and I appreciate the information we're getting today, but I can tell you that I've received virtually no requests from people in my ward certainly asking for a ban. I just haven't. And I appreciate the opinions I've heard today, but at this point in time, I'm not prepared to reopen it. So I would be prepared to receive the delegations, and that would be the extent I would go with this today. And I'll make that motion.
I'll look for a second in a few minutes, but Councillor Armstrong.
So,
Yes, I'm going to second that motion. I certainly appreciate the individuals that have come in and presented.
Councillor Armstrong, could you speak a little bit into the mic?
Presented. I certainly appreciate and thank the members of the community that have come in and presented their views on this. I also have not received any complaints. I know that there must be complaints out there, certainly, obviously, that goes on, and I believe our fire department has, when called, address those concerns, I hope, in an effective way based on our current bylaw. So in any event, I will support this. It's just been too short a time since we already dealt with this, so on that.
Councillor, you're going to second the motion? Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's been a year. I'm getting old. I think that when we did this last year, we did receive some information from Middlesex London Health Unit. Can somebody let me know if that's the case?
Mr. Livingston.
Through the chair, there was an appendice to the report that was received last year. We also have a member from the Middlesex London Health Unit here today, should that be required.
Would you like to respond to that question?
Sure. Good afternoon. My name's Dave Pavlitic. I manage the Healthy Environments team at the Health Unit. And about a year ago, we did submit a report basically identifying the risks with wood smoke. Essentially, our communication really hasn't changed much since then. It's basically in reiteration of what we had said previously.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. So here's my concern, and you know, I recognize where committee's going on this. I think we have our bylaw, and for the most part, the bylaw seems to be more about whether it's safe to have a fire and whether it's going to cause like concern to the community by you know, being too close to buildings or too close to trees or that sort of thing. I understand that the councillors haven't received complaints from their ward. I honestly haven't received complaints from people that have identified themselves as constituents. I do know from when I was campaigning during the 2014 election that I did knock on the door of one person in my ward that had serious concerns with her neighbor's outdoor fire. So my concern is that I see the bylaw being written more about fire prevention or like forest fires or burning down somebody's house or something like that, and less about protecting neighbors from nuisance fires. The feedback that I do receive is that there's a bylaw, if the smoke is blowing into somebody's house, and they call, nothing really is done about it. Or the bylaw says that there can't be, you know, a wind greater than a certain speed, and if there is, then people aren't supposed to have outdoor fires. I don't think that the bylaw, even the bylaw as it's written now, is really being enforced to prevent people from being annoyed or if they have health problems from being seriously affected by their neighbors' fires. I know we just got this a year ago. I would personally be interested in getting more information from staff, but I would want it to be more rigorous than it was last time. When I'll be honest, I've lived in London. I went to university here and moved away. I've lived in London now for 16 years. When I first moved here, I couldn't believe that you were allowed to have backyard fires in London, because when I grew up in Sarnia, we weren't allowed to have backyard fires. When I lived 10 years in Toronto and Mississauga, we weren't allowed to have backyard fires. So it seemed very odd to me that when I moved to London, that backyard fires were allowed. I'm not saying that I'm looking to take that step right now and initiate an outright ban. I do think that I need more information on this, but as I said, I see that I'm probably outnumbered on committee today for that, but I think it's something that we might need to take a deeper look at.
Thank you. Councillor Squire.
I just wanted to mention, because I had a constituent that raised concerns because there was a person next to him who was lighting fires on a continuous basis. And I have to say, he got a really good response from the fire service. The person was charged, and the person was eventually had to give it up. He was just being charged continuously. And he did that because it was a nuisance fire. And I certainly don't want to leave anyone the impression that I think people should just be able to cause nuisance to their neighbors by burning fires every day. I'm talking about people such as myself who do it on a recreational basis 2 or 3 times a summer, often with their neighbors, as a community building exercise that we do to have a barbecue or something like that, and quite frankly, the smoke dissipates. So I wouldn't want the public to be left with the impression that the fire service doesn't do anything, because I saw a case where they did a really good job of eliminating the problem.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Councillor Armstrong, would you just take the chair? Sure. While I make a comment. First of all, I want the people who made the presentation to understand that I certainly respect and appreciate their presentation. I don't want to say unlike my colleagues, but over the years, I've been here, this is my 70th year, and I've had many requests to ban outdoor fires. Spasmodically, I will say, but always because of health reasons most of the time. And I'm not just talking in my ward, I'm talking from right across London. My concern about this at this point in time is that we have a process. I was here when, many years ago, when we had, in fact, 2 or 3 times, when we had public participation meeting. And the bylaw that we have at this point in time came as a result of that public participation, or those public participation meeting. In fact, at the time, one of the subjects that was heavy in it also was barbecues, period. The use of barbecues outside, because not just the pits, but the barbecue and the smell from the barbecue. So what I want to ask staff, just to respond to 2 quick questions for me, is, one is there a cycle that we come back with to review the bylaw? That's number 1. And number 2, when there is a complaint, could you kindly explain the procedure of how that complaint is responded to?
Through the chair, we don't have a set cycle. Well, that's not entirely true. When the 2007 version of the bylaw came out, which is the current bylaw, for probably 2 or 3 years, we'd come back annually just to kind of provide an information report on what was occurring. Now we've done it more at the request of council, so it's nothing we do on a cyclical nature. With regards to a complaint, if we get a complaint from a citizen, we do respond with the fire truck. We have heard cases where I've had people call up, well, I've had a problem. And I said, did you call us? Well, no, I don't want to do that because I don't want my neighbor to know who I am. But we never reveal the name, and we will call the person back. And not, like when we get back to the station and say we found it in compliance or not in compliance. And so if the fire is in non-compliance, we will extinguish it. We have, I'd say, probably be more of a comprehensive process than most municipalities in that we have a checklist that the officer goes off, checks off. That copy is given to the person holding the fire as an educational piece to see what they've done wrong, or even if it's in compliance. And next time they have a fire, they can actually refer to that. In addition to that, the paperwork comes in, and then we send a copy to them if it's in non-compliance, along with a pamphlet that's in, obviously bylaws are in legalese, you know, and we put it in the more simplified nature. So we end up providing a lot of education, and where we have violations more than twice, people are then denied open-air burning. In fact, we've got one in the courts as we speak, but I can't talk about because it's in the courts. So there is an educational process to it as well.
Thank you. Okay, committee, we have a motion on the floor. It's been moved and seconded. Ready to vote?
Closing the vote, the motion carries 3-1.
Once again, thanks for your interest and your presentations. We're going to move on to item number 11. Catholic, would you want to make a little presentation before we ask the delegates to speak? This is after you speak, then we'll call for a public participation meeting. This one is a public participation meeting.
Just double click. Oh, that thing, okay, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just by way of background, back in December of last year, we presented a work plan on the business licensing bylaw review of not only looking at the existing business licensing bylaw, which is the regulations are over 20 years old, but also looking at new categories that council directed us to review. And we outlined a phased public participation process where we would introduce regulations at public participation meetings, get comments back, and then come back with a final public participation meeting on the entire bylaw. So we've already had a couple of meetings, one in January and one in February, and today we're having our third meeting on 4 categories. The first category is commercial parking facilities, and this category is an existing category that we have been licensing for many years. We have 50 licensed commercial parking facilities in the city currently. Municipal purpose for this regulation is for consumer protection. And I'll just highlight in all 4 of these categories some of the key regulations we're looking at. For parking facilities, the key regulation is providing information to the public on 3 fronts. What are the fees to park at this facility? Who maintains this facility and manages it? And what are the fines or parking notices associated with this facility? We're also looking at prescribing maintenance standards with respect to removal of debris and snow storage at these facilities. The second category is pet shops. Although this is a new category to the current bylaw, the category was previously licensed back in the 80s and early 90s, but was not when the new bylaw came into force. So we are proposing to license pet shops, and the focus of this is health and safety of the animals and consumer protection of purchasers of companion animals. And the regulations focus on a couple fronts, limiting the source of companion animals for retail sale to registered rescues, so rescues that are registered with the City of London. And if you go on our website, we list 12 rescues that are currently registered, humane societies and animal shelters. We're also looking at maintaining a list of permitted animals to be sold at pet shops. I just wanted to focus that we're focusing on companion animals. So although pet shops have for sale and display a whole array of different types of pets, we're focusing on cats and dogs in terms of the sourcing of these animals. Third category is public halls. We have 50 public halls that we are currently licensing and have been for the past 20 years. The municipal purpose is focused on health and safety and nuisance control. Some of these public halls are situated in and around residential areas and do create some nuisances. So the key regulation would be allowing the license manager to place conditions on these licenses for the public halls that are at times creating some nuisances in the neighborhoods. Nuisances mainly focus on noise related to private parties. Lastly, seasonal sale businesses, once again, a category that we license and have been licensing for many years. We're splitting out the categories down from 9 in our current bylaw to 2. The first one is a 1-week license, and that's mainly dealing with fireworks, sports memorabilia sales, and sales of flowers. So you may have seen just this 2 weekends ago, Easter weekend, some flower sales. I can assure you we had enforcement officers out making sure that these short-term retail sales were licensed. The other category is a 1 to 3 month license for seasonal sales, and that's mainly focusing on food sales and produce sales during the summer months. I'd be happy to answer any technical questions at this time. Thank you.
Committee, do you have any technical questions? Okay, I'll open it for public participation. Do you have a motion?
I move that the resolution be approved.
Do you have a second? Second. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Committee, do you have any technical questions? Okay, I'll open it for public participation. Do you have a motion? Do you have a second? Second. All those in favor? Motion carries. moved and seconded. Ready to vote? Voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Members, we are in public participation now. I will allow anyone who wants to speak to come forward and speak for a maximum of 5 minutes. You'll be timed. You don't have to use up the whole entire 5 minutes if you don't need it. So I will start with over there since I see this gentleman at the right. Could you kindly give your name?
My name is Jonathan Reed.
Sorry, before you do that.
Yep.
I've got to take 2 delegations first.
Okay, no problem.
So just have a seat. I'm sorry. Yes, we do have 2 delegations that were asked for time. And the first is Florian Morrison. Will you come forward?
Hello. So first of all, thank you, councillors, for giving me your time today. And I'm just going to speak very, very briefly that my name is Florian Morrison, and I'm co-founder of Animal Outreach Local Rescue Group. And it's taken many, many years of hard work, but rescue organizations in London can be very proud of all that has been accomplished here. We have a strategic plan that includes a provision for the compassionate care of animals, and this proposed bylaw for pet shops is just one more step in our commitment to that enhanced animal care strategy. So, as I mentioned earlier, I strongly support the pet shop bylaw before you, and I urge you to support it, and I think it's a very good thing to have happen here in London. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Florian. And the next is Vicky.
Thank you for...
I'll say your full name.
Okay, my name is
Vicky Van Linden.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Councillor Usher. I want to thank you all for receiving my delegation today. My name is, as Councillor said, Vicky Van Linden. I live in London, and I'll provide my address to the clerk later. It's really gratifying to be here today while we have a well-thought-out recommendation from Civic Administration before us. You also have an excellent recommendation from the City's Animal Welfare Advisory Committee, and we'll hear a delegation from Mr. Rob Laidlaw, who represents ZooCheck, one of Canada's foremost animal protection groups. Mr. Laidlaw regularly consults with the leading scientists, academics, and veterinarians working in the field of exotic animals. I know that you also heard from Kim Thomas from Kismet Rescue, who shared information on the nature of puppy mills and how they impact the selling of dogs in our communities. She is truly an expert on these matters. Tonight is gratifying too, because tonight's recommendations follow on years of work. About 5 years ago, the Animal Welfare Advisory Committee made a formal request to prevent the sale of dogs and cats from commercial sources. That request was referred back to Civic Administration, and here we are today. And I believe that the licensing plan that staff has developed was well worth the wait. Now, with this licensing plan before you, I am really optimistic that London can wrap this up in a positive way, an even better way than we first requested. You might hear some oppositions from stores that do sell commercially bred dogs, cats, or rabbits, as well as exotic animals. They might tell you that their businesses cannot prosper without being able to offer such animals for sale unrestricted. Let's consider, though, that several businesses already thrive in London and across Canada, selling food and supplies for pets. Some chain stores and privately owned businesses do not sell any living creatures of any kind, yet they prosper. So it's clear that local businesses that would still be able to sell a variety of animals under this recommendation cannot logically claim that they would be unable to stay in business if the list of animals that they can sell and their sourcing is restricted. The sourcing mandate that is included in the recommendation will join us with other communities across North America working to stop the proliferation of puppy mills. Rabbits are also bred in commercial operations where welfare is not as big a priority as profit. The sale of rabbits and their eventual homelessness is a growing problem. And the sale of exotic animals like birds, rodents, and small mammals can be better regulated on a positive list that will be developed by the city representative. They too are also bred, kept, and transported in completely inappropriate ways that cause them great suffering. Some of these are even stolen from the wild, contributing to the decline of their species. The trade in small exotic animals, including birds, is often destructive and socially irresponsible, in my opinion. Just because a rodent, bird, or amphibian does not display emotion and pain in ways that we are able to easily recognize does not mean that they are less vulnerable to suffering than a cat or dog. This has been proven beyond a doubt. In this licensing plan, you have an opportunity to stand with hardworking rescue volunteers who give so much of their time and their money to provide our community invaluable service. Their work dramatically reduces the pressure on city-funded services. They do this without financial gain for themselves. The same cannot be said for breeders, brokers, and sellers of animals to serve as pets. While it's true that animal sellers pay business taxes and provide employment, so do the many stores that do not sell animals. But when an animal that the stores sold becomes homeless or in need, it falls on the shoulders of rescue groups and city-funded services to respond. So by reducing opportunities to impulse purchase animals in stores, you can reduce demand on city-funded services.
You have 1 minute, Vicki.
It's true that this licensing plan will not take care of the problem of animals purchased from online sites and other jurisdictions. But just because we cannot change everything does not mean that we should not change what we can. This is a reasonable bill that will not harm any creative and responsive business. All businesses need to keep up with cultural change, and it is not the role of council to protect those who resist modernizing. I hope that you will think, too, of the very real suffering inflicted on animals who are the victims of a poorly regulated industry. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Vicki. Okay, now we will go to the audience. The gentleman who was standing there at the mic, I'm going to give you the first opportunity. Would you kindly state your name and your address, please? Thank you.
My name is Jonathan Reed, and I'm speaking on behalf of Pet Paradise in London. So I'm going to first talk about cats and dogs, and then I'll go on to reptiles and fish, because although they're not the primary focus, they were also mentioned in this. So in regards to the sale of kittens and puppies, I think it's important to know how the sale of these animals actually works, specifically at our store. All the cats are donated, and then they are seen by a veterinarian. They are given their shots, dewormed, and flea treated, and then they're switched over to a high-quality food. Any customer purchasing these animals will receive the veterinary papers, and then we will also educate them on how important it is to fix their animals. This can very easily be seen by the sheer numbers that have dropped in our sales in accordance with live animals and dogs. So in comparing 2016 to 2013, cat sales went down by 50% and dog sales went down by 75%. So that's purely from educating the public with each sale that we make. So it's been proven once again that education works, rather than banning things which only makes it go more underground, unregulated, with no accountability, and this goes for all animals. In regards to reptiles and fish, the community is already fearful of owning reptiles due to the city's very poorly written bylaws. There are already provincial and federal agencies in place to deal with these issues, and they do it with the help of experts. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency, Ministry of Natural Resources, and Environment Canada, just to name a few. Not all animals have established captive bred populations in Canada. Wild animals coming into Canada, when done legally with all the correct paperwork, does not have a damaging effect on wild populations. It is pollution, cities expanding, hunting, and habitat destruction to deforestation, oil, and creation of things such as dams that makes an impact and causes species to become endangered and extinct. Banning these animals will only help raise another generation of people that are ignorant and fearful simply because they're uneducated on the subject. In regards to businesses, there are a large number of pet stores in the city that employ hundreds of people and bring in millions of revenue in each year. This will have a huge impact on all of them. And despite what you heard, you have to take in mind that many businesses that do not sell livestock were built to not sell livestock. The ones that are significantly larger and have large portions of their store that require the space to use it. We have no problem with record keeping, licensing, or regulation, as long as it is reasonable, but what is being proposed is not. We're also curious to know what credentials the Animal Welfare Committee has in regards to not only cats and dogs, but also fish, reptiles, amphibians, and insects. There are some incredibly knowledgeable people that work at these pet stores, and some of which have been around for over 20 years. So it's interesting to note why, when making such a big decision regarding animals, not a single pet store in the city was made aware about this meeting, or the Welfare Committee. We had to hear from it from the president of PieJack, who we then bounced it around to the several stores, and we got about 2 days' notice beforehand. We have no problem working with the city to create stronger bylaws that benefit the community, but the way it is currently being proposed is wrong and will do more harm than good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who is next? The lady on the left, do you want to speak? Go ahead. Yes?
Yes. My name is Janet Robertson, and I'm from London, Ontario. I'd like to thank you, CAPS committee members, for bringing the subject up again after too long a hiatus. The animals have been suffering far too long, and London should join the other cities, towns, and municipalities who have taken action to ensure that these retail animals are not sourced from profit-making individuals. We must speak up for them because every day the animals suffer terribly in silence, especially the breeding pairs. I've been involved in dog rescue with registered groups for over 12 years and have seen the horrors that many of the breeding pairs suffer while being overbred and living in horrific conditions, all to supply the pet store retail outlet with baby animals. I can speak from firsthand experience since for many years I helped a rescue group to clean up, bathe, clip dozens of mats, burrs, fleas, and other rubbish from the coats of these precious souls, all the while trying to make their shivering little bodies understand that they will never again be abused. By the way, that was with Kim Thomas from Kismet Rescue. They are terrified since often the only experience they get from human hands is abuse. For far too long, the pet stores, retailers, and markets have been telling customers that the puppies are from licensed breeders, and indeed they are. I speak concerning the commercial breeders or kennels, as the puppy millers like to be called. And yes, the townships license them as a source of revenue. So this is what they share with the buyer. They are licensed animals. These licenses are supposedly given out only after an inspection of the premise, including the standard of care involved. In fact, most times, the owners come to the township office, pay their yearly fee, and take home a license to breed. They are rarely inspected, and when they are, the standards are low. The animals lose, again, big time. Most spend their entire life in a 2x2 cage. I'm speaking right now of puppies and breeding dogs, with a wire bottom, no tray, and never get to experience a kind hand, a warm heart, a warm home, good food, or any vet care. And yes, some of the puppies, kittens, and bunnies are registered because, speaking of the puppies in particular, the Canadian Kennel Club will hand out registration on the person's word and never inspect the premise or the animals, just wanting the money from these licenses. I can tell you all the horror stories of the puppy mill breeder animals who have been released or taken to a rescue-friendly vet to be put to sleep after their gentle bodies are totally spent and their spirits totally broken. Many have stayed with me permanently when they are too terrified to be rehabilitated, and many have been adopted into wonderful homes. I know you didn't come here to hear this. However, it must be told and repeated over and over, as I do. A good many of the barns where these innocent animals are living, if you can call it that, have no water or electricity. So with the buildup of ammonia from the years of urine, many have eye ulcers with the horrific pain included, and many are blind as a result of this circumstance. And when they don't produce many puppies, or the puppies of that breed is no longer popular, then the female is shot or drowned, since it costs money to keep an animal who's not producing. There are several puppy brokers who go around to retailers, and I'm sure the kitten and the bunnies are included in this. They too have brokers. They go around to retailers, they get orders, then they go to the barns and the mills and pick up the 5-week-old babies from the popular breeds ordered by the retailer. These puppies should never leave the mom that early. We know this by experience, and I am begging you to please put a stop to this cruelty. This report I'm reading is a good one, your report, and I'm wanting to thank the city and staff for putting forth such a comprehensive recommendation. I realize the amount of work involved in such and applaud you for the hours you've spent. I'm happy to bring many pictures and a couple of crippled breeder-released senior dogs to show you these poor animals who are the cruel result of human ignorance as to the inside story behind their adorable little puppy, kitten, or bunny. Please do the right thing and put a stop to those breeders who will stop at nothing to sell an adorable little animal, despite the fact that it might be and often is very sick and will cost the buyer a ton of money, and there is no way that they can find out the information about that particular breeder. They will never be given that information. Sadly, the veterinarians who look after
You have 40
the
seconds.
mill dogs do so only for the money and sign the vaccination sheets often without ever examining the animal or trying to make sure the standards of care are good. Thank you for your time. And as I stated, I'm happy to help in any way I can to try and make a small dent in this horrific industry.
Thank you very much. Anyone on the right side here? My right? Up there? Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Wendy Brown, and I'm with the Animal Welfare Advisory Committee to the City of London. So I just wanted to state that we fully support the recommendations before you for the licensing bylaw, and also that I think it adequately addresses the need to have more control in the hands of the city on a number of different levels, including public health and safety, the health and welfare of these animals that are being sold, the capacity of our city to be able to respond, and resources related to that. So, and also for environmental protection, the risk for invasive species, and the protection of species at risk, because it's very difficult to know what you're looking at when we are addressing the issue around the sale of animals that are taken out of the wild. And we've presented a template, which is before you, from the Animal Advisory Committee, and it's just a sample template. So, and we look forward to being able to work with the city on these issues. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone on the left? Go ahead, sir.
I guess this is for short people. Wow, I'm from Sea Life Central. I don't deal with dogs, cats, or anything else but marine fish and corals. I noticed I've never been notified of this until last night. So I'm not prepared with anything to actually, I just came here to actually hear what's been said and take note of it. Now, the thing about it is that I agree with some of what has been said about puppy mills and legislations and so on and so forth. Whereas the wild animals or animals taken from the wild, people should actually do a little bit more investigation where that's concerned, because that's an international business, and other countries have actually addressed those problems. Now, you might think by taking something from the wild, you're actually injuring the species themselves. It's just actually proven that that's not so, okay? Animals has to be, you have to know what to do and how to take care of animals, especially the ones that you actually deal with. As I said before, I know nothing about dogs or cats, but I do know about marine fish and corals, okay? To say, okay, put everything into one category, it doesn't really work. If you're gonna address the problem of puppy mills, address the problems of puppy mills. Do not paint the whole picture on everything else, because then you're actually legislating without educating. So do a little bit more research, okay? Get the facts and find out what you're actually doing, because things like corals or fish, corals, for instance, are taken from the wild, but these countries that do it legally actually have to take out one colony, frag it, and replace that one colony with 20 colonies. So they're actually repopulating the species, not reducing it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anybody on the right? Mr. Laidlaw?
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today on this particular issue.
I wanted to take issue first with just a couple of comments that have been made. I've been involved in dealing with these issues at the federal, provincial, and municipal levels across the country and internationally for the past 38 years. And the suggestion that there's sufficient levels of oversight and controls in the whole industry is just ludicrous. If you look at the information that's available readily from public agencies and other people involved in this, you'll see that. But I think that's sort of a side issue. It's not really something that's relevant to this discussion at hand right now, which is the staff report regarding the business licensing bylaw. I think it's very, very good. I think the dog and cat provisions are welcome. They're part of a trend that you're seeing right across the country, across the United States, and in other jurisdictions as well. So they're very good and in keeping with changing societal norms in different areas and changing ethics and perspectives. But what I did want to offer a few more comments about just was the idea of a permitted list as a regulatory control mechanism for animals in a municipality. It's something that's becoming increasingly more common. It's established in the Netherlands. It's established in Belgium, the province of Nova Scotia, the province of New Brunswick, the state of Maine. Many municipalities that we've surveyed in Quebec all use positive lists, and there's a number of reasons for that. And I'm just going to give you very quickly, because I don't have much time, just the advantages of the permitted list system, which I hope you adopt here in London. Number one, permitted lists as opposed to prohibited lists. So permitted lists say what you can keep, prohibited lists say what you can't keep. Permitted lists are more concise and easier to understand, especially for enforcement personnel. They're more safety conscious because they're preventative and precautionary in nature. And that's because the animals that are allowed in the city have to go through a vetting process in the city, which has the responsibility for public safety, is able to exercise a due diligence process that doesn't exist when you're dealing with a prohibited animals list where everything is allowed until there's a problem. Permitted lists utilize an evidence-based approach to animal welfare, human health and safety, and environmental protection, if that's one of the criteria that you include in your consideration of animals for inclusion on permitted lists. Permitted lists are far more manageable and facilitate a more efficient and effective regulatory process. The positive list can be catered according to each individual jurisdiction, so the criteria can change, although there are some criteria that are pretty much common right across the board, whether you're looking in Canada, the US, the EU, or elsewhere where permitted lists are used. For people that are concerned about animal welfare, what's particularly important about positive lists is that they place the burden of proof that animals can be dealt with humanely, that they pose no human health and safety threat, pose no environmental threat on the people who want to make money off of these animals. Right now, it's the complete opposite. Any citizen who's concerned about animals has to do all this work, yet they're not the ones that are benefiting from having those animals in the community financially or otherwise. So the burden of proof that these animals satisfy the criteria lie with the people who want to make money off them or exploit them or keep them. And I think that's a very important difference, and one that really should have been there right from the get-go many years ago when these laws were established first. So there's many, many advantages to permitted lists. I think they're the way of the future. Other municipalities, including the City of Toronto right now, are looking at this, as is the province of Ontario. They've just started looking at this as well. So I would encourage you strongly to support this. I think it's a good thing. Nobody's talking about banning animals. Everybody would have a fair say in what's on the permitted list, and it would be evidence-based. So it's not like a bunch of people with one opinion are battling people with another opinion and one wins out. It's based on evidence. The evidence dictates what is on the list or what is not. And I think that's something that everybody should be able to live with. So that's all I really wanted to say. I think what's being proposed is very good, very well thought out, in trend with what's already happening elsewhere in Canada and in other jurisdictions, and it's the way to go. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. Anyone from that side?
Hi, my name's Paul Mackey. I'm from Big Al's Aquarium Services, and we primarily deal with fish. We don't have any dealings with cats, dogs, any mammals, and any amphibians. We do with some invertebrates. And I just have a few statements. As far as the fish are concerned, for me to bring in any wild-caught fish into this country, Canadian Border Services has to have the CITES permit for me to bring it in. So internationally, we are watched for what we bring in and what we have in our stores. It's less regulated when you're dealing with captive bred stuff. And in what was printed, it said that all I would be able to carry is captive bred stuff. And I feel that that could be worse if you just did that, because you're not introducing any new bloodlines or anything of that sort. Also, I don't understand why fish are grouped in with dogs, cats, rats, anything like that. Because if you do that, then are you guys also going to regulate grocery stores that have live lobsters, or Red Lobster that has live lobsters, or any of the other places that have live fish, any of the Asian food markets, anything like that? Because I feel that it's punitive to us who have to go out of our way to make sure these animals live, and beneficial to them for they would get more sales and not have to take care of the animals the way we have to. Also, when we bring in fish, we're not hurting the environment. What hurts the environment is mass fishing, net fishing, where you're catching lots of species at the same time and weeding out the ones that you don't want. That is not the way our fish are caught. Our fish are very specific. We have to go and find specific types of fish. Stuff like emperor angels and other types of exotic fish like that are hard to find. So they're divers that go down and specifically look for those specific types and don't catch any by mistake. They're all like that. Also, a lot of the countries that we deal with are third world countries where that is their primary source of income. So in implementing something here, we could potentially be devastating a community across the world without thinking about the repercussions of that. As far as the dogs and cats and the mammals and all that kind of stuff, I can't speak on that. However, in this proposal, fish have been blanketed with and all only have captive bred in it. And I don't understand how you can blanket a genre that has 100,000 types and say, yep, we can't have any of them. It just doesn't make sense to do that way. Nobody has asked us. I've been doing this for 20 years. I've been at the Border Services. I've seen how the fish come in. I've seen how it's all handled. I've been to the places where they are fished. And I don't think that anybody who's sitting here opposing this can say that they have the knowledge towards the fish or the endangered species that we have to know so that we can bring the stuff in. Because Border Services gives huge fines if we bring in the wrong stuff. So we need to make sure that all of our stuff is right, all of our paperwork is in line, and all of that kind of stuff is done. I just think that we are being included in something that was geared towards cats, rats, dogs, and other animals of that type. And we're being grouped into it because we fall under the category of pet stores. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone on the right over here? Anyone looking at all of you? None of you? Okay, the gentleman who is walking up the stairs. Oh, you're going to speak?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, you go ahead, Mary.
Okay. Yeah, I was not sure I was even going to speak at all. My name's Marie Bloch, and I just came down in support of the bylaw, and I won't speak to some of the fish issues, that's not my area. But in terms of the companion areas, we talk about dogs and cats. I hope that you do include rabbits as well. They're impulse items purchased during the Easter holidays, and the rabbit rescues end up with quite a few of them, or sometimes they're just simply released in the wild to fend for themselves, and of course with the inevitable result that then they die. The other point I wanted to make was that I haven't done a really thorough survey, but in going to pet stores over the years, a lot of the pet stores already work with the rescue groups or with London Animal Care and Control or with the London Humane Society, and they have the animals for adoption there rather than having them for sale. And finally, the other thing I wanted to say is that you might be thinking, well, you know, if the problem is puppy mills, and in large part it is, then maybe there's a different level of government that really should be dealing with that. And that may be true, but the problem is the provincial government is not dealing with it, and they have no intention of dealing with it. And so that is why you see the trend with municipalities saying, well, okay, we have to do something. And this is not perhaps ideal, but it's what you can do. And so I urge you to do that. And it may end up much like the pesticide ban, where after municipalities banned the pesticides, and I see Councillor Ash, you went through that with us, and you know, when the province saw that that's what everyone wanted, then the province did finally step in and do something. And so this may very well end up the same way. So, you know, I do know that a lot of thought went into this. I do know that licensing the businesses makes a lot of sense, and I urge you to go forward with it.
Thank you, Marie. Okay, the gentleman up at the top.
Yeah, my name is Michelle Cote. I live on Wellington in London, and I foster rabbits with Hoppy Hearts Rabbit Rescue, and I also volunteer at the London Humane Society with the rabbits there. Excuse me if I pause a lot here. Right now I'm fostering 2 rabbits, and it's it's 2 rabbits out of 7 that were, how would you say, that were abandoned in St. Thomas around Easter time. Likely from some breeder releasing their stock because they couldn't sell them. Timing is definitely suspect here because they were found in about like a 1 or 2 week time span. They're definitely domestic rabbits, which are very different from the wild rabbits that you see in nature. They're different species altogether, and they don't survive in the wild. Also, I happened to visit a particular pet store who tonight omitted to mention the rabbits in their statement, and they usually have 2 or 3 very, very young, small rabbits in little glass enclosures in the front of their store. And just out of curiosity, I visited them but around Easter time. And the number of rabbits that they had was numbered about 10 or 12. They were putting the rabbits in other parts of the store, obviously, with just waiting for the impulse buyer to come buy rabbits. And, you know, unfortunately, those people that just buy rabbits at Easter time on impulse end up with quite a surprise because the rabbits are not what they expected, especially when they get older and are not spayed or neutered, which is extremely necessary for rabbits. I also volunteer at the London Humane Society with the rabbits there. They are so full with cats and dogs that some of the dogs are actually some of the dogs are actually stored in the same hallway as the rabbits and small animals. So when you walk into that hallway, all you hear is barking. And then like all these small animals and rabbits just cower away. And they live with that every day. And that's because they're overpopulated. They have too many strays there. And, you know, I can't help but think that if, the pet stores that do sell dogs, cats, and rabbits weren't selling them like from for-profit breeders, that maybe they would have fewer strays and the rabbits could be treated much more humanely and hopefully would have had a better chance of adoption. Rabbits are very a misunderstood species of animal, and even, even sometimes the people that work with them with really good intentions don't have all the right information. We've learned a lot recently about rabbits, and it's really important that we not allow pet stores to get rabbits, and dogs and cats from breeders for profit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I just want you to know that you did well. I know that sometimes when you stand there and your throat needs clearing, it's an obsession, but you did well. Thank you. Oh, anyone else up on this side?
Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm William Comer, and I just sort of came here to kind of see.
Sorry, we
what
didn't get
everyone-
that. Say that again, your name.
William Comer. I came here to see what everyone was kind of talking about here, kind of both sides there. And one kind of question came to my mind. This seems very focused on regulations and perhaps bans on licensed pet shops. Is there any thoughts as to sort of the online pet market, Kijiji and things like that? Does this address that at all, the way it's currently proposed?
Get that answer for you at the end, sir. We're not going to interrupt just to get the answer, but we'll take note of that at this point in time and respond when everybody is finished.
And there's a couple other, I guess, points there. I suppose, positive list does sound promising because it makes it a little less unclear, so more clear. But a positive list without a submission process could be a little bit detrimental because it does seem that based on the draft list saw there was quite an extensive list of cats and dogs, birds and things like that. But other sort of animals, such as, again, reptiles, amphibians, fish and things, might not be publicly, anyhow, seen as significant of life forms as the others. Essentially, something that had an ability for someone, if they were going to bring in a certain species of fish, to submit something, and if there was no complaints within sort of, 3 days or 7 days to bring that in, or something to that effect, it would become quite an extensive list of fish. You could possibly have, 100,000 on there. It might be a little bit of a volume to print, so it might need to be digital, but just some way to enable the addition of species in a process whereby they couldn't be unreasonably banned from being sold.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll get answers for you at the end if we have some. I saw someone going up there, the lady. Would you like to speak now? I think you can pull that mic down a little bit if you...
I think it'll be okay.
Okay.
My name is Kaylee Nago. I reside at 55 Price Street in London, Ontario. I am the founder and president of Hoppy Hearts Rabbit Rescue. We're a registered nonprofit rescue dedicated to helping domestic rabbits, as well as providing education about rabbit care to the public. I'm speaking today to be the voice for domestic rabbits in our community. I support the recommendation to have all dogs, cats, and rabbits sold in a retail setting to be sourced from recognized rescue organizations and humane societies. I'm glad that rabbits are going to be included in this recommendation. I conducted a survey this week as to which pet stores are currently selling rabbits. Out of the 35 stores that I called, I learned that there are 2 stores that are currently carrying rabbits. I asked each store where the rabbits are being sourced from. The one store indicated that they receive their rabbits from a local breeder who they deal with on a regular and ongoing basis. The second store indicated that they normally have rabbits come from a wholesaler out of Montreal, as well as occasionally from a local breeder. I have also seen, in addition, 3 Pet Value stores sell rabbits in the past, but when I contacted them at the time, they were no longer selling rabbits. So despite only 2 of these 35 stores selling rabbits, all these other pet stores have been very successful without having to profit from animal sales. And with so many other cities currently operating similar bylaw amendments, it really makes sense for London to make the same updates with their animal bylaws. Cities like Cambridge, Toronto, Kingston, Mississauga all have similar bylaws And I seen today that Chatham-Kent is also considering the same amendment to their bylaw. And I'm sure most of you are heavily familiar with puppy mills, cat breeding, and cat overpopulation issues, but you may not, however, know too much about the world of rabbits. So I'm going to quickly read through some jots. I'm sure you won't remember all of them, but maybe you'll pick up on some of them here. So rabbits on average live between 10 and 12 years, which can be similar to a large breed dog. Rabbits can be litter trained. They're considered exotic pets by most veterinarians and require more expensive care. They become sexually mature as early as 3 to 4 months of age. A rabbit's gestation period on average is 28 to 31 days long, and a female can become pregnant again almost immediately after birth. One rabbit can create almost 100 offspring in 1 year. That is substantial when you're talking about people who are abandoning rabbits outside. Rabbits should be spayed and neutered, just like dogs and cats, to prevent unwanted litters, behaviors, and health issues. Unspayed female rabbits are 80% likely to develop uterine cancer over the age of 3. Behind dogs and cats, rabbits are the third most popular pet in North America, and as a result, also the third most surrendered to humane societies and rescues. Domestic rabbits are not the same as the native eastern cottontail and do not have the same survival instincts if they are abandoned outdoors. Rabbits require a diet of 80% hay, 12% fresh greens, 6% extruded pellets, and 2% fruit or treats. Rabbits are not good pets for children. They do not like being picked up. They're very fragile and have bones like glass. Rabbits can easily injure a child by scratching or biting. The House Rabbit Society, which is sort of the rabbit Bible, if you will, recommends a housing space minimum of 3 hops long and twice the height of the rabbit to allow natural movements. This means that your standard pet store rabbit cages are not a humane housing option. Rabbits are very social and should have a bonded, spayed, or neutered rabbit friend. Rabbits need at least 4 hours per day to run around and exercise. The majority of rabbit breeders I've encountered house the rabbits in livestock quality housing units. These are typically 2x2 hanging wire cages where the rabbits often develop foot sores due to their sensitive feet on top of the wire caging. These type of living situations deprive rabbits of their natural behaviors such as chewing, digging, running. When rabbits are sold in pet stores, they are often still required to live in spaces that are too small. We find most pet stores sell their rabbits starting around 6 weeks of age. That's because they're small, cute, they sell faster, and it's easier to house more in one smaller space. Young rabbits can be difficult to sex, and in many cases, people end up with the sex they weren't prepared for. This can result in unwanted litters and more displaced rabbits.
You have another minute.
Thank you. Easter time is exceptionally difficult on humane societies and rabbit rescues. 80% of rabbits purchased at Easter do not stay with their families. The lucky ones are rehomed or surrendered to humane societies. The unlucky ones abandoned outside to fend for themselves, usually with fatal outcomes. Many people impulse purchase rabbits around Easter, and having them in pet stores only adds to the number of rehomed or abandoned animals each year after the Easter novelty wears off. I'd also like to add at this time, Hoppy Hearts Rabbit Rescue has not been considered to be added to the recognized rescue groups list despite our requests. We are following all the current recommendations that are required for rescue groups to be part of that list. We are also the only organization in London, Ontario that spays and neuter rabbits. To the best of our knowledge, neither the London Humane Society or Animal Care Control spays or neuters the rabbits. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You spoke already.
Oh,
I don't
yeah,
allow twice.
Okay, I didn't know that was a rule or not.
What is it you wanted to say? How long is it going to be?
Thought I had there, but if it's
No,
if
I'm
you're
not going to allow a
speak
debate.
once, then I can sit down. Is it all
Yeah.
right? Basically, it sounds like there's the sourcing from, I guess, adoption agencies. And it might be a question to be answered later. Are the, in what's proposed, are pet shops able to offer these animals for adoption that have been brought in? Or do they have to go, does someone have to go to a shelter to actually make the purchase or adoption, or can that be facilitated through the storefronts that are already there? I know in a number of cases at Campus Creative, actually.
Okay, you ask your question. I'll get an answer for you at the end. Anyone else? Can, Rob, can you help him with that? Can you help him with that mic?
Thanks. My name is Francois Paquette, and listening to all this debate here, why is it you're going after the pet stores? Because a friend of mine recently had to get rid of her pet dog because of illness, and she just mentioned it on Facebook with, she was willing to let it go for X amount of dollars, which to me was quite high, and it went within 2 days. So if you ban the pet shop from selling the pets, the people who are selling them from the breeders, like you talk and everything else, they'll just go on the media system and don't care about your bylaw that you will pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Francois. Anyone over here? Anyone else on the right? Anyone from down below? Okay, I'll say 3 more times. Any other person? 1? Any other speakers? 2? Any other speakers? 3? I'm going to ask the committee to make a motion to close the public participation. Okay, so first I'm going to ask Mr. Sorry. Oh yeah, we have to vote on this. I thought it was voted on. Sorry. Thank you. So, Mr. Katolik, did you get those questions or many of them that you could respond to? I have some, but I'll just leave them to you to start.
Yes, through the chair, and I refer to page 237 of the agenda, and it's the schedule to the pet shop business category. And a couple points I wanted to make. First one is on section 4.1, where it talks about sourcing the animals. I think after hearing from the public, we need to be more specific on what types of animals we're focusing on, and that is on cats and dogs, companions, cats and dogs. At this point, we are not focusing on companion rabbits. The issue of the positive list, well, we debated this internally back and forth, whether we go with a positive list or a banned list, and we went with a positive list after having staff discussions with the advisory committee, AWAC. And the positive list will be a fluid list. It'll be something that if a certain form of animal comes up and there's a request to put it on a positive list or a request to ban it for specific reasons, you as a council have delegated the authority to the license manager to have these discussions administratively. And we did this recently with the residential group home bylaw, where very minor issues were delegated to staff to put regulations up for public debate, put them up on the web, and then there was a discussion, and then staff approved those regulations. So we're looking at a very similar process in this. I don't think every time that something comes up on this positive list that needs to be added or taken away has to come to a full council debate. With request to internet sales, that is the reality. There's more than pets being sold on the internet. I know that some platforms have restricted the sales of animals from puppy mills, but we can simply make those requests as a municipality, but realistically, it would be impossible to enforce.
Thank you, Mr. Katolik. Now I'm going to committee. I just want to bring to your attention, we still have a number of items to pursue, and I'm just afraid that we will begin to lose quorum. I know that one of our members are leaving at 7 p.m., I've been informed. So with all due respect to each of us and each of you, I'll ask you to try to make this as efficient as possible. It's not just this item, but all the other items. So anyone wants to address or speak? Councillor Squire first, and then Councillor Cassidy.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I just need clarification because we've had people talking about different animals here tonight. So I want to be clear. And then I heard a lot of people talking about rabbits. And this is all through you, Mr. Chair, because my wife's already reminded me to make sure I do that on this round. That a lot of people said, well, rabbits need to be on that list, and then I think you just said companion rabbits wouldn't be. So, and then we heard about fish, and we've heard about reptiles. So I'm kind of a little confused at this point about what animals specifically we're looking at and which ones we aren't. And then my second question would be through the chair is, for some of the concerns that have been expressed tonight, I think it's important to know we're not passing the bylaw in its final form tonight, as I understand, and they can still have input to you on any changes. So those are the two issues I have.
Through the chair, I'll answer the second question first. That it is correct that these PPMs are specific to categories of the business licensing bylaw. Then we're going to come back with another PPM on all the categories that we presented before you. So there absolutely is opportunity for debate with the public. With the types of animals, companion animals, we are looking at companion dogs and companion cats in terms of sourcing at this point. If we wanted to expand it to rabbits, we could consider that maybe as a phase 2, but at this point, that would involve amendments to some of our other bylaws because we currently approve animal rescues. There's 12 listed on our web. We go through a process. We have had requests for rabbit rescues. We just see that the focus that we should place right now is on cats and dogs.
Mr. Katolik, that goes for the marine type also, fish, etc.?
Yes, Mr. Chair, the marine type animals would be on a positive list if they were appropriate for sale in London.
Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a quick question. First, I'm going to jump quickly to the section about seasonal sales. I just wondered if charities are included in that. So I know a lot of charities that sell, say, Christmas trees. Some churches sell Christmas trees at Christmas time. So they would then be under the fee structure. I've lost my place in the agenda, but the fee structure where it's slightly higher because it's less than, there's the 1 week license and then there's the multiple months license. So I just wonder, Mr. Katolik, through you, Mr. Chair, if you have consulted with charities that do these sort of seasonal sales and it's for the benefit of a charity.
Yes, through the chair, we have not consulted individually with the ones that get the seasonal sale license. If council wishes or if committee wishes to give direction tonight that we give consideration to a reduced license fee to registered charities, and I focus on the word registered because a lot of times citizens come to us, businesses, they want reduction in fees because they call themselves a charity. So that is a prerogative that committee can make tonight. In the current bylaw, there is there are some regulations with respect to fees and registered charities and reductions of fees.
Thank you. So it's in the current bylaw, but it's not. That hasn't carried over to the proposed bylaw. Is that correct?
It's in the current bylaw under other areas, but it's not in the current bylaw for seasonal sales. But if committee wish to do that, we can certainly come back and add that reduction. Okay,
I would like to add that because I do know that there are different churches that sell Christmas trees. That's the only example I can think of. So I would like to add that as an amendment. And so now I do have a couple of questions about the pet one. So the positive list that you're proposing, is it roughly the same list that AWAC has suggested?
Through the chair, yes, we did have staff at all the AWAC meetings, and they were debating the positive list. There are some still areas that are under discussion, but once again, it's a process that you have delegated to the license manager. That'll allow, it's a fluid list, that'll allow for continuous public debate once the list is issued to change that list, both adding and deleting animals.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering some of the concerns that mentioned tonight by people that deal in fish and marine animals. I'm wondering if those comments will be considered as you move forward. I heard some comments about maybe captive breeding isn't necessarily the best. I'm not going to weigh in on this. I'm just wondering if that will, you take those comments under consideration.
Yes, we will.
Councillor Cassidy, I'm going to ask Mr. Kotolik a question, and in the meantime, I'm going to ask you to formulate that motion that you want to be added. Okay? Mr. Kotolik, I listened to everyone here, and I'm beginning to think that this item number 12 from AWAC, perhaps, and I'm not saying this for sure, but I'm saying perhaps, created some concern, because it sounds to me as though people read 12 also within 11. I'd just like you to clarify, because you said that you're focusing on cats and dogs. Can you clarify exactly the difference between this list, whether it's going to be, it's part of your licensing requirement or not? Because this is where I think that a lot of people read about rabbits and fish and a whole lot of other things, which was not mentioned in the item that we're talking about. And perhaps you could just clarify that. Maybe I'm all confused myself, I don't know.
Yes, through the chair, the positive list, and I'm referring to page 237 of the agenda, the positive list is something that civic administration will determine based on consultation with animal welfare specialists, the public, because this list will be vetted through the public in draft form. We'll receive comments, we'll approve the list. As I mentioned, the list will be fluid, so changes could be made to the list based on further public discussion. The focus on sourcing the animals is section 4.1 of the draft regulation. And as I mentioned, our focus is on companion cats and dogs at this time.
Are you ready, Councillor Cassidy? Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. Councillor Helmer, once again, welcome.
Thank you, yeah. So a couple of comments for our staff to consider, and I appreciate all the feedback we've heard so far. I'm glad to hear that in terms of the restriction on the sourcing, that it's only going to apply to animals that could conceivably actually be sourced from these locations. So for example, I don't think you could go to the Humane Society and get a fish. Like, I mean, I don't know that they even have them, right? So there may be rescue groups perhaps, but I'm not sure that there's any fish available in the municipal animal shelter. And so I wouldn't want to come up with a regulatory regime that would just saying you can't sell these animals at all in the city, and there's no place you can possibly get them from these 4 sources. So based on what I'm hearing, you know, really I think the concern around dogs and cats is that, and also rabbits from the members of the public, is that these are places that you can find breeders who are producing them in large quantities. There are also animals that if they're not spayed produce a ton of other animals, right? And we've heard that when we talk about our budget for animal services in the city, especially when it comes to cats, that the overpopulation of feral cats is a big problem. I haven't heard so much about the overpopulation problem in terms of escaped or abandoned rabbits, but I imagine considering how fast they can breed and how quickly, that could be a significant issue as well. And so I think having a focus actually, frankly, on those 3 animals, a species of animals, would be helpful, because I don't think we really have an overpopulation of feral fish. Similarly, I don't think we have a big problem with crickets, right? You can buy crickets. I used to buy crickets for my lizards at a pet shop store. I would buy the crickets and chuck them in the container for the lizard to eat them, right? And I guess that's pretty cruel from the perspective of the cricket, but it was important for the lizard to survive. So I don't want to be overly broad with the regulatory approach, right? And I do think when it comes to insects, we haven't talked about them at all, but it did come up in relationship to other kinds of invertebrates like lobsters, that we're really dealing with problems we actually have in the city and not problems that we don't have in the city. And so I think around fish and insects, we're going to have to figure that out. The positive list for fish could be very long, as was pointed out. Similarly, I'm not sure how many different species of insects are being retailed, but that could also be pretty long. Reptiles, I'm not so sure, and I hope we'll take, it says in the regulation that there'll be potentially a classes of animals approach, which is something we're familiar with it in the animal control bylaw, where we have different classes of animals set out and different rules for different classes of animals. So in that case, cats are actually included along with rabbits and guinea pigs and other similar types of animals that tend to be domesticated and kept as pets. So I hope we'll take that kind of approach with it and not necessarily deviate so far into very specific species where we already have a system for classes. I do think that the issue that the Pet Paradise folks raise is something we need to think about as well. Where, so for example, if they're taking a donation from somebody who brings the cat to them and then they're selling the cat, are now we just creating a system where the person wanting to get rid of the cat is going to go to the Humane Society and then Pet Paradise is going to go to the Humane Society and then they're going to sell the cat? Because that just seems to be adding bureaucracy into what is already a voluntary transfer of, I don't need this cat anymore, can you please get it to somebody who wants it? And I want to make that easier rather than more complicated. So I don't think I really have any suggestion about changing things beyond that feedback to our staff and to my colleagues, but I think it's been useful. And I'm glad we're taking this approach of having the initial PPM and some time and then deal with it all at once, although it could be quite a PPM if everyone shows up again.
Thank you. You have that motion? Mr. Katolik, I'd like to ask you a quick question. I heard a lot of people talk about reptile and rabbits and fish and marine stuff, animals and so on. And yet I hear you talking about dogs and cats. So what I want, and we're just talking about the licensing to sell these things. And then we talk about the sources and the sources for these. When I read the sources, I don't see that these sources have anything to do with fish. Maybe rabbits, but fish. So I need you to say it again. We're just dealing with, for this license, we're just dealing with dogs and cats sourcing from these 4 locations. I don't get it with this list. I understand the list, but the list is not part of this yet. Could you help me understand that and for the benefit of the folks up in the gallery?
Yes, through the chair, the sourcing of animals is solely focused on companion cats and dogs. And in section 4.1, we provide 4 categories of which they can be sourced from. The positive list is something that Civic Administration will develop in consultation with the public and AWAC, and that is a list of animals that will be permitted for sale in pet shops. So I'll give you an example of a type of turtle that we've been advised by Upper Thames that is a concern because citizens buy this turtle, the turtle grows, it gets too big, fills the aquarium, and then the parents say, we got to get rid of this turtle, it's too big. So they throw it out into the river, into a pond, and the turtle breeds, gets bigger, and then becomes an invasive species. So those are the types of experts that are coming to us saying, you know, it all starts with a little turtle, but if we weren't selling these turtles, then it wouldn't become a possible future community issue. So that's the types of experts we're dealing with in creating this positive list, which is going to be a fluid list, always changing, but totally based on evidence from experts and public comments.
But Mr. Couture, that will be for another time, am I right? And that's why some of these people came here and said they were not informed of this meeting?
Yes, that'll come once we finalize the final list with the experts, with public consultation. It'll come before Civic Administration and not Committee and Council.
we have a motion on the floor. Commercial parking facilities, civic, public hall, seasonal sales for be included in the updated business licensing bylaw or pet shops. And civic administration be directed to report back with respect to reduction to license fee, these same license fee, I assume, that may be appropriate for charities conducting seasonal sales. Okay, we've moved and seconded. Let's vote. Oh, sorry, hold on. I didn't see your hand. Go ahead.
So
Councillor.
are you taking comments on all the different categories in the bylaw all at the same time? And there were no more after pet shops? I think people had a feeling that it was just about pet shops.
Well, I'm assuming that it goes with the parking facilities, pet shop, public halls, and the seasonal sales. Councillor, are you referring to B with all four or just one category? That's the question.
Sorry, that's Councillor Helmer's question, Mr. Chair. I thought he was referring to people in the gallery that he thought. So my B was with respect to seasonal sales, the bylaw part that talks about seasonal sales.
Try this.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to ask to indulge us to move on. Let's do 12, because there might be somebody here from AWAC.
There is.
So, 12 has to do with the same. Wendy, do you have anything to say with respect to item number 12? Your report from AWAC? Wendy?
Yeah, it's been submitted already, our report from the Animal Welfare Advisory Committee
Yeah.
on this issue. Yes.
So we're dealing with it now. I just wanted to know if you wanted to say anything.
Sorry if I wanted to what?
We're dealing with it now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no.
Okay. That's fine. Thank you. Voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Councillor Armstrong?
I'm thinking that pretty well we're done with those issues. I guess, I'm just wondering if we've got a couple people that have been waiting, and I'm wondering if we could go to 16 and deal with it. Because I think, I'm thinking we pretty well, everybody in the room, we're here for the items we just dealt with.
Are they here for 16?
No, but there are two people that are here for 16, so if we can do that earlier than later.
Well, I'm at the committee's disposal. I want to get on with and finish before 7, so.
I would support moving to 16, Mr. Chair, just because we have those gentlemen in the gallery that are waiting for this item to be heard.
We have an added item, item number 16. And Councillor Armstrong, would you like to address this to start?
I will, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, this has to do with the earlier issue that was before council a while ago, the naming of a park, Vimy Ridge Park, and again, a memorial for the issue of Vimy Ridge. As you will recall, I had made a request that council look at renaming a park that was in my ward, Vimy Ridge Park. I now wish to withdraw that because recently 427 Wing, the Air Force Association, contacted me and presented a proposal that they have they have lands on their property that they would be prepared to dedicate as a memorial to Vimy Ridge. They have already planted over 100 trees there in relation to the 100th anniversary. These are large trees, and this happened quite some time ago. And they felt that, and they will be looking at commissioning an appropriate memorial that would be suitable for Vimy Ridge. Now, their letter is on, there's a letter on here on number 44, and I have to apologize for this all being added, but they actually sent this letter into the clerk's office, but for whatever reason, they were not, wasn't put on as a regular agenda item. So you're getting everything kind of without a lot of notice, because I don't like adding too much, but this is a pretty simple, straightforward issue. So as you know, what the direction was to our staff, go off and look at option number 1, option number 2, and if there's any other options out there. Well, this option makes a lot of sense to me. And so I'm just wondering, with the committee's could we ask that the president of the 427 is here, and could we give him a couple minutes to speak to the issue, since he has come and waited a couple hours, and just in case there's any questions. I don't know if I have to move that or.
Excuse me a second. Well, thank you very much, Councillor Armstrong. I certainly appreciate and I respect the folks who are here, but I'm going to ask the clerk if she would kindly address this. We have a little complication here that needs to be clarified. Sure. Because what you're asking for, we may not be able to accommodate. So, clerk, would you address it?
Thank you, and through the chair, when this submission was received in the city clerk's office, the city clerk did review the submission. It is not the same as the previous submissions that were before this committee. It's not city-owned property, nor is it any property that the city has jurisdiction of. So the reason that this is on as an added is primarily with respect to the councillor's submission indicating that he'd like to withdraw his previous submission that was before the committee, and the additional documentation is in support of that.
Okay, so I'll finish with Councillor Armstrong. Go ahead, Councillor Armstrong.
And I say this respectfully, any person or group or organization should be able to communicate to this council through committee or directly to council. And it doesn't matter what the issue is, like whether they own the property or not, has nothing to do with them being able to communicate and ask to come to their council and communicate anything. So I utterly reject this idea that their letter from that organization shouldn't be accepted and put on an agenda because they don't own a property. I think that's arguments or a discussion that we certainly could have here, but I don't think the clerk's office should be deciding to reject a letter when they're communicating to the corporation of City of London. I don't think the clerk's office should be deciding on whether or not their letter is acceptable. And so I'm troubled by this because this should have been on a regular agenda. You should have had it on the weekend to look at. not for me to have to slip it in under my letter to meet the rules. Okay, so there's something wrong here. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. I don't know all those details, and I am not going to make the decision. I'm going to get the committee to make the decision. However, I think the clerk was explaining something. I don't know if the correspondence between the people who wrote this and the clerk is complete. I do know that the clerk said that we don't have any jurisdiction over that, and there has to be a correspondence somewhere. But I'm going to leave it to this committee to decide whether they will allow, because this is the way we do things. We don't just bring somebody in, one of us, and say, I want that person to speak. They have to ask for delegation status. With all due respect to the folks, they have to ask for delegation status before they come. So I'm going to Councillor Squire first, and then I'll go to Councillor Cassidy.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't think this is a matter we should be getting particularly excited about. I don't find it to be very complicated at all. Councillor Armstrong has come today and he wants to withdraw his proposal to name the area he wanted, Vimy Park. He could have done that by just sending, you have to remember what the prior direction was from the committee and council. It said staff was to go out and get other proposals for the park and come back to us with a report. So I would have thought that Councillor Armstrong, if he wants to withdraw it as a committee today, that's fine, he can do that. But I think he could have just told staff, look, don't consider mine anymore, I'm not interested, and they could have come back and told us that. Similarly, with if there's 5, 6, 7 proposals, if we kept saying, okay, every time we get a new proposal for a park, have them come to this committee and one by one on different days, tell us why they want their particular site to be the park. I thought the whole purpose of what we did was to send this matter away, to have staff get those proposals together, and then we can consider them all together. So if this group submits their letter to staff, staff will do their due diligence to see if it's an appropriate site, and they'll come back with them. I don't think, you know, anybody's trying to be nefarious or anything like that, and I think it's pretty straightforward. I have to say that I'm not in a position tonight to hear a submission on why another location should be the #1 choice now, because it appears we now have 2, we may have 3, we may have 4, I don't know. But to have them all coming to meetings and saying, I've got a letter today and I'd like to talk to you about my proposal, let's do it in an organized fashion as we meant to do. And I don't think anybody should take any offense at anything. I don't think anything's happened, quite frankly.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I agree with Councillor Squire. But perhaps we could even say, refer Councillor Armstrong's letter and the letter from 427 London Wing to staff as they are doing their consultations and their search for the most appropriate site for a Vimy memorial in London. So if we could refer these submissions to staff that are doing this this work, then that ensures that this is considered.
Okay, I'm open to Councillor Armstrong, I'm open to a motion though. Councillor Armstrong, I really don't want to make this into a...
No, that's fine. I'm happy to do that motion, that my letter be referred to staff. I think it should be that, you know, that not just referred, that we accept that was the clerk that asked me to do this this way, so it's formal, so that we accept the communication, accept the withdrawal, whatever, of the naming of that park, just so that's off the slate, and refer the submission of 427 to our staff for consideration as in this park process.
Okay,
Recognize-
we
I think
have
that's
the
all that
motion.
we're looking for.
We have the motion. We're going to get that motion up.
Yep.
And then we're going to read it, and then we're going to vote on it. Okay? We're just getting it typed up now. Okay, I'm looking for a mover and a second. Why is it cloud is 18?
Mr. Chair, can we put some reference into the letter from specifically 427 Wing? Just in C, somewhere in C, just to make sure that we've got it, that,
Oh, I see. In C?
yeah. There's nothing in there, there's no.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Voting?
Do I just do it without him? Just a sec, just a second. Okay, just a second.
Voting? Did you vote?
Closing the vote, the motion carries 3-0.
The gentleman up above that what we've done here in C, we've referred your correspondence to staff for consideration. They will probably get back to you and try to get some explanation. We're sorry, this is the process that we have to follow. But thanks very much for being here. At least you got some experience of how we handle all this. You're a veteran. Thanks again. Can we do 13? And after that, 14 and get this over with.
Still have your vote consented.
I know, that will be easy. So, Mr. Catholic, would you like to address 13 for us?
Yes, through the chair. This is an issue that has been before this committee previously. And what it is two condo corporations, one which naturalized a small portion of their property and it inadvertently encroached onto the other condo corporation's land. And so we issued a notice to the one that encroached with their naturalization to have an area around the naturalization to separate the two properties, and they've agreed to do that. We're working together with our ecologist to remove some of the invasive species that have been planted. So I would suggest that this be referred to staff because we are reporting back on this item already. It's in the deferred list in this agenda.
Okay. Okay. Let's vote. Hmm?
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Okay, can we do item number 14? Who's going to respond? Address this.
Me?
You, okay. I'll ask the clerk to just address this for us.
Through the chair, I'm just open to any questions that the committee may have regarding the report. We are looking for some direction related to what the committee and ultimately council would like to see captioned at this point in time.
For your sake, the way I understand this is that what the clerk is really asking for is to proceed with, and if I'm wrong, please tell me, with council's YouTube, and the others will come later. There's not enough money to do everything. We can't do the committees right now. So it's a matter of time, even though we have until 2021 to have this all completed. It doesn't mean that we're going to wait until the last minute. We're going to work on them, but they have to put some money in the budget and so on. But the amount of money that we have right now in the budget will only be able to cover what we have for the YouTube for the council meetings. And if anybody sees it differently, please let me know. Do I have a... Councillor Cassidy?
So I'll move what's in the conclusion there, that council direct that the pre-recorded videos be closed caption for the YouTube channel on a go-forward basis. Do I need any more specific? Do we have some? Oh, there it is. There we go. Okay.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, folks, I think apart from 15, which is the deferred list, we still have the consent items and we have confidential items. So what is it that somebody had asked to pull? I think it was Councillor Cassidy asked to pull a number of them. So would you like to? Yes, please.
Okay, so I don't need 3 pulled, but I do have so 3, 5, and 6. I have a comment and maybe a quick question, and then I really just wanted to pull 7 and 9.
Okay. So you want to pull 7 and 9, is this what you said?
Yes, and somebody indicated 8. It might have been somebody who's no longer here, but I really just need to pull 7 and 9.
Okay, you got that? So can we move the others and get you to address the 2 that you want? We've already done 4. So can we do 2, 3, 5, 6, 8? And then before we approve that, you can address them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, number 3.
Are you okay, Councillor Helmer?
Okay, number 3 is the Community Action Program for Children. I just have a quick question about what are some of the programs. So in the report, it says the purpose of this report is to provide an overview, blah, blah, blah. So it talks about the initiative funded through the Public Health Agency of Canada, and the Marymount Children's Centre is doing some of the programming, and the South London Neighbourhood Resource Centre is also getting some funding for programming. I just want like a quick, brief overview of some of the programming.
Ms. Livingston.
Through the chair, the CAPC funding is largely for early years programming, so 0 to 6. A couple of examples from Marymount are in the areas of positive parenting, family math, where families have a meal and do math together, budgeting, some of the things that South London Neighbourhood Resource Centre does is largely around parent education. They have an Arabic women's group, a teen mums group, a collective kitchen where kids are with their parents while they're learning food skills. And we've been doing this for a very long time in this community. Those are just a couple of the examples.
Thank you. Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. That's excellent, and I always love these reports where we talk about getting funding from other levels of government to do the great programming that's going on here in London. So my comment on number 5 is about number 5 is the supporting the community response to Syrian newcomers. So I just wanted to say that I'm really glad to see that the year has gone by. And it's not just a forgotten issue, that work is continuing, and that the federal government is continuing as well to touch in with London and make sure that the newcomers that came through this process are still being looked after and helped in the community. So I just wanted to make that comment. And number 6, I had a comment about so this is the development, so the agreement with the province of Ontario to support the development of an immigration strategy. And we're getting, and the provincial funding of $20,000 to support the financing of research to aid in the creation, implementation of London's new immigration strategy. So I just wanted to comment that there's a section in the report where the LEDC has reported that at least 5,000, at any one time, there are at least 5,000 openings in the local labor market, which could be filled by immigrants. When we were going through the poverty panel process, we recognized this gap between unemployment. There was a large unemployment number during the recession that London that we had here in London, and yet at the same time we had all these jobs that went unfilled, and so it's this sort of catch-22. So I'm wondering, and I'm hopeful, I guess, because I'm not sure staff can really do anything about this or address it, but I'm hopeful that some of the policies that exist at other levels of government will be addressed in this process. If they're giving us funding and they want us to develop these immigration strategies, there are certain policies at other levels of government that prevent newcomers that come here, prevent them from working in their field of expertise or the field of where they're educated in their home country. So I just wanted to throw that comment out there. That's all.
Good.
3, 5, 6, 8. I moved it. Oh, my mic, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I just want to make a point that, so with item number 2, we're receiving it. Item number 3, we're approving and delegating. Item number 5, we're receiving it. Item number 6, we're approving it. And item number 8, we don't have anybody here from the health department, but I just wonder, just for our fulfillment, if Councillor Helmer would mind addressing it, since it's, I know that what it is calling for is a retraction of a motion that, a resolution that Council made some time ago, and I don't have a copy of the resolution here. But, oh, here it is. It was just placed in front of me. So this is a request that comes from the Health Department, London Middlesex Health Unit, and that's what item number 8 is. And I believe that the way I read it is just a matter of retracting this resolution. It was passed in June 2012. And all the reasons and the explanation is there in the letter from Health Department. So I'm going to put those on the floor unless somebody else wants to add anything to this. 2, 3, 5, 6, and 8. Yeah. We're voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 3-0.
Okay, so we'll put item number 7 on the floor. And before you go to that, I'll just ask Mr. Katolik if he would like to address this unless you have a specific question. Mr. Katolik, you have anything to say on this?
Yes, this is a report back at the request of council to look at short-term rentals. There's various platforms. The most popular one is Airbnb. I have to say that Airbnb, in discussions we've had with them, they've been very forthcoming in their information, produced reports for us specific to London. The summary of the activity of Airbnb is summarized in the report. And what this report indicates is a work plan. We want to proactively review this issue, get ahead of the issue before it becomes a problem like it has in some municipalities globally. We're going to meet with the stakeholders this summer, meet with neighborhood groups, and come back in Q3 of this year with some options to focus on possibly licensing, possibly any zoning changes, and possibly any additional tax considerations.
Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so I have a couple of quick questions and a couple of comments. The consultation that will take place in second quarter with stakeholders and key neighborhood groups. I know that there was a petition. I hope that that through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Katolik, you received the petition from the people in Ward 5. And I'm wondering if that community group will be Linda Goodwin came to, I think, the last time we talked about this. So will that community group be one of the groups that you consult with when you're doing your consultation?
Yes, through the chair, we'll consult with all community groups that want to have a discussion with us. We'll have likely the same format as we have been doing with the noise bylaw.
Okay, so should I, through you, Mr. Chair, should I make sure that you have a copy of that petition in case you don't, or the contact information for that particular neighborhood? Okay, I will do that. I have a question about the vacancy rate in London, and if you, right now, we know that it's extremely low. And do you see these Airbnbs or these short-term rentals exacerbating that problem? I've heard of that being an issue in other jurisdictions where the vacancy rate is really low, so people are holding on to their homes, their apartments, whatever, and not putting them on the regular rental market because they can make more money on these short-term rentals.
Yes, through the chair, that's exactly what we've been hearing from other municipalities in North America, especially municipalities that have a high focus on tourism. Investors are purchasing condos and they're renting them out as Airbnbs. Some are going to the extent of actually creating mini boutique hotels within these condos. So they're subdividing the condos into 2 or 3 hotels. We've been on webinars with other cities throughout North America. The trend has not hit London yet. I can't predict whether it'll be hit London as hard as it hit other tourist and higher population municipalities. But in the report, we did summarize some of the bylaws and ordinances that we looked at. Collingwood, for example, has had a big issue because it is a tourist destination of Airbnbs creating, or short-term rentals, I should say, creating issues, which has gone to the Ontario Municipal Board already. And their bylaw has a separation distance between these types of residential short-term facilities. So it is something that we have to look at globally, not only as a neighborhood stability issue, but also affordability, because in the research we've done to date indicates that in larger municipalities, it is affecting affordability and vacancy rates.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that. And I want to also take the opportunity to thank you for the report. It's very informative, and we know that the sharing economy is here. We see it in all different aspects, and so I like that we're being proactive on this. I want to make a few comments about some of the things that are mentioned in the report. It talks about not being very many complaints. Well, I know of one short-term rental in my ward, and the complaints are all funneled through one person, so it comes through as one complaint, but there are actually multiple people on on that, that could be lumped into that complaint. And I believe the party house, rented out for large weekend parties, I think that may be the one that's in my ward. So I just wanted to say that, just because it's coming through from one person, it's an entire neighborhood that's being affected by that particular short-term rental. And one of the points that was made to me is that these short-term rentals can, if they're rented out to a certain type of people that are just looking to have a party at the house for a weekend or something like that, rather than, say, somebody doing some research or some work at the university and they need to stay in London for a couple of weeks, that's a different scenario. But when they happen in these older established neighborhoods, it can be very disruptive. And a lot of times, I know the woman that's been speaking to me said there are a lot of seniors in the neighborhood that are near this house. And so when you ask them, do you have a problem with Airbnb? They don't know what that even means. They literally don't know the term I think they have learned it now and they understand it now. But when we say, what is there a problem with Airbnb? Most people don't even know what that means. So, and I just wanted to mention as well that there is a complaint mechanism right through to Airbnb as an example of one of the short-term, the organizations that does short-term rentals. And this particular community group has not had a lot of success in complaining directly to Airbnb. So they're hopeful that we will put in the proper bylaws in place to ensure that there's a proper balance, that we can have these short-term rentals, but that it doesn't really have such a negative effect on these older established neighborhoods.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Oh, sorry, just a second. Councillor Helmer.
Thank you very much. No surprise to anyone that wanted to talk about this issue, I'm sure. I can tell you as a consumer who's used Airbnb many times, it saves me a lot of money. And frankly, it saves the City of London a lot of money, because when I go on business for the city, I tend to book in Airbnbs that are about 35–40% cheaper than what is being recommended for the conferences. And so I don't want to lose sight of that number one, it can be a great way of people traveling more affordably. Number two, some of the places I've stayed have been just beautiful heritage buildings that have been repurposed into residential uses. Maybe a couple of units in the building are being used as Airbnb, but it helps to support heritage restoration and retention of those buildings. In Winnipeg, for example, I stayed in an old factory that had been converted to condos. It was very excellent. In Ottawa, I will be staying in like a house that has a name. It's such a great heritage building. It has its own name, right around the corner from the conference center. And I know that kind of revenue is important for making those buildings viable long-term. I hope that in the consultation, and I think it's very smart to be ahead of the game and talking to folks early on before we start to see some of the negative consequences that can come from, especially like large apartment buildings getting a lot of units that are being dedicated to Airbnb rentals. Also talking with the providers themselves, so talking directly to Airbnb, and I'm glad to hear that they have been open about their operations and what they, and I know that they have had regulations come in very, very different cities that I think work for everybody. And I think that's hopefully where we're going to get to. But also that we listen to the consumers and try and talk to them. I know it's hard to engage that group of people because they're generally tourists and they're moving around. But not just the tourism industry, but the people who are touring and get their feedback on what they're looking for, because I don't want to lose sight of that in the discussion overall. Thanks very much.
Good point. Thanks. Okay, let's vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 3-0.
Put item number 9 on the floor. Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with the committee's indulgence, I would like to read this letter out loud, because this is something that was a result of the last CAPS meeting that we had. It was an individual that actually worked on the community diversity and inclusion strategy and has a long time experience with experiencing racism in this community. And I just wanted to share his input, if you don't mind. So he says, Shakoli, Mayor Brown, and London City Council, I recently had the honor and pleasure of participating in an initiative by the city to look into the issue of diversity and inclusion of people who've been overlooked or dismissed due to their status as a visible minority or person with a disability, or just plain old being different. I've watched and listened time and time again to the people in this city get offended and irritated anytime the issue of racism or discrimination is brought up, because there is a belief that those issues are not present in London. People, ignoring it doesn't mean it's not happening. During the last few months, I've volunteered my time and energy towards the CDIS initiative, and believe that during that time, a lot of people also devoted many hours to looking into ideas on how to make positive changes within the City of London. I was actually surprised by the turnout to the first meeting, as there were about 200 people in attendance, and thought that maybe something good will come from these sessions. People from all walks of life were present, and I heard a lot of good ideas to try and address concerns of the lack of diversity and inclusion. There was a feeling of enthusiasm and hope in the room every time we met, and again, I was looking forward to being part of the change that I know this city needs and deserves. The sessions that were held garnered a lot of good ideas, and there was the hope that some of these ideas can and will be implemented in the future. I know that this initiative is going to carry on its work in the immediate future, but my hope is that it can continue further than the next few months. I was present at the Community and Protective Services meeting on March 23rd, and I listened to the presentation by the co-chairs and was again hopeful for the future. But as I listened to comments, most notably from Councillor Usher, about how the city had started a similar initiative in 1997, and again a few years later, it made me think about what was really going to happen to this work that we have done over the last few months. Is this going to be just another attempt at appeasing the minorities of this city? Is the work of this committee going to be seriously looked at and given the proper attention that it deserves? Disillusionment began to creep into me, and I started to feel that, although the councillors present support and stand behind the work that we have done, again, what is really going to happen? At the third and final meeting of the CDIS, we were given more time to look at the issues and pinpoint some immediate topics to address. Naturally, I was part of the First Nations group, and we did discuss and suggest some actions that could be implemented in the very near future. Our discussion centered on the need for education and more discussion about how the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report of 2015 on residential schools can be utilized. The evening was again well attended, but not as well as the previous meetings, and it was good to see Mayor Brown open the session once again with greetings from the city. Near the end of the meeting, the facilitators posed a question: where do you see this initiative 1 year from now? With confidence, I stood up and stated to the room, exactly where we are today. I was immediately taken to task about my response and was told that I had offended another participant for making that statement. I believe others have felt likewise about my comment, but only one person stood up and said anything about it. I made that statement based on my experience over the years of seeing these types of initiatives come and go, but then Councillor Usher made it even more evident with his statement. I've spent the majority of my adult life promoting and fighting for the recognition of the work done by the First Nation citizens of the City of London through my volunteer work with the Namarand Friendship Centre. I've lived and worked in this city occasionally for over 30 years and have been witness to or victim of numerous instances where we have been judged solely on the fact that our skin appears to be darker than the majority of the population. I believe that a lot of what we are dealing with stems from a lack of understanding and learned behaviors through different sources like all forms of media, the internet, and a general dislike for anyone with different heritage. Intergenerational racism is something that's very evident because we tend to be taught these ways as a child by those around us, so we grow up believing what we have been shown or what we have heard. I have also come to the conclusion that some people don't like change or don't believe that they need to change their way of interacting with others. I may become disillusioned at times, but I will not give up because the work I do and the changes I try to make are for the benefit of future generations, which is what we are taught as First Nations people, that what we do today affects those who will come 7 generations from now. I would like to thank you for your time and wish you well in your future endeavors on behalf of the City of London. So I just wanted the committee to hear that instead of just reading it, and I wanted to make sure that if there are is there anybody watching the live stream, that they would hear that as well. I met with, and this is from Brian Hill, Brian Hill, and he is a member of the Oneida of the Thames First Nation and a resident of the City of London. So Brian had contacted me right after that meeting with some of his concerns, and I want everybody to know that Brian's overall feeling is one of hope and optimism, And he's dedicated to this work and will continue to see that. So I would like to move that we receive his letter, and also that we refer this letter to civic administration and they be directed to consider it when they are preparing the final report of the community diversity and inclusion strategy.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cassidy. Any other comments? I look for the motion and a second. I just want to say, Councillor Cassidy, I'm very happy, I'm very glad that you took the time to read this letter, because I think it was a very moving letter. And I hope nobody think that because my name was mentioned in it was mentioned negatively. I don't look at it that way at all. I look at it very positively, because I think that exactly how he felt was the sentiment that I was trying to express. And that's why he stood up at that meeting and said exactly where we are. I don't think that the point of making that is to make a point that we must not be the same place where we are today. That's what we need to be able to take from that, more than anything else. Thank you. So the motion is there, seconded. Any other speakers? We'll move it. We'll vote. Do the deferred list before we go.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 3-0.
Might as well. Okay. So, committee members, we have one item left and then we go into confidential, and that is the deferred list. I'd like to do that before we move on. Do we have any comments on the deferred list? I know that Councillor, where's that letter? I lost the letter. Anyway, Councillor Armstrong's has an item on that deferred list, but I suspect that what we need to do is to just refer to it, and then at the next list, it will be moved off based on that letter. So, anything else on that deferred list? Yes, Councillor Cassidy?
I just noticed that the outdoor tethering of dogs, item number 2, estimated report back was April, and I wonder if we need to update that since we're almost done April.
Through the chair, I would suggest that that be changed to June. Yep. 2017.
I'm going to ask a question. A lot of them said 217, estimated report back 217. We don't have a month or anything like that. Between Ms. Livingston and Ms. Datasbeer, could you tell us anything about 3, 4, 5? Those are the ones under your name.
Through the chair, I believe, having submitted the report tonight, we have met the requirements of number 3.
With respect to number 4, we're just, the community has arrived at a solution. I'm just waiting for the final pieces on it, and then I'm happy to provide a report.
Item number 7, Mr. Katolis, are you familiar with that? Oh, is that the one we just did tonight?
Yes,
okay.
yeah, so June also.
Yeah, okay. So, do I have a motion? Okay, be updated and let's vote then.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 3-0.
Thank you, committee. Thank you, staff. We have a confidential item, which I'm going to ask for a motion to go into in camera, and then we'll go into room number 3, and I will ask if we could close out the meeting after that in room number 3, so you might as well take it. Okay.
It's on the screen.
Give us a chance to take a couple of minutes to get to that room.
Yeah. So we'll meet in there in 10 minutes. Is that okay? Thank you.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 3-0.